Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Gran Turismo Series Racing League Season 35, Round 3. That's right, it's the season finale where we are at Circuit de la Sarthe for what is expected to be an absolutely phenomenal end to the season. I'm your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and we're going to get straight into it by taking a look at the drivers who are out on circuit, but not only that, also the circuit, the current standings, all the statistics you need to know what exactly it's going to boil down to as we come on to this season finale. With 8 drivers currently in the lobby, well 9 drivers actually, and 10 if we include MDC, who'll be racing tonight as well, and is our lead steward. Let's get underway without any further introductions and start calling our drivers off one by one. And of course, as always, I hope you're all doing well. To those of you tuned in, or will be tuning in a little bit later, I hope you're all having a good start to your week. And, well, without further ado then, let's start reeling them off. So last time out, round number 2, in France, with St. Quarte, we saw a lot of intense action within EU Division 1, our top division of course within the EU, and well, the story was not a simple case this time of Olaf Biscuit running away with the trifecta of wins over the course of the 3 races, unlike in round number 1. Instead, what we saw, our championship leader at the moment, Olaf Biscuit of course, what we saw for the British driver running around in the Porsche 962C for the last time here, staying with the famous machine and the one that seems to have been rather dominant in terms of its overall setup, is that Olaf did not have it all his way, picking up a win in race number 1, a second place in race number 2 and a second place in race number 3. It's meant that rather than getting the maximum points haul out of 2 rounds back to back, he now finds himself with a distinct advantage, we should say, at the top of the standings on 95.5 points. That gap between himself and some of the other drivers trying to chase after that all-important season 35 championship win, that gap has started to drop. Now, it has dropped mostly to no other than Dylan Cliff from Cosmic Esports. The Irishman here also running in the Porsche 962C one more time. And Dylan had a reasonable set of results in round number 2. Perhaps not everything went his way as expected, in the fact that he managed to achieve a 3rd place in race number 1, a 4th place in race number 2, and then a 3rd place in race number 3, meaning that he stands on 85.5 points, so 10 off of Olaf. He's going to have to go some way today to overcome that 10-point gap, but there's 3 races available, and just one drop to result by Olaf could see Dylan Cliff immediately jump into contention for being our championship winner. But we shouldn't forget that it's not just a 2-way fight for the championship win. We also have Yaya777, who we'll refer to as Yaya, another British driver running out in the Porsche 962C as well. Now, Yaya was one of the ones who started to benefit in round number 2. Having had a reasonable string of results in round number 1, that momentum continued, whereby he picked up a 2nd place in race 1, a 3rd place in race 2, and then did not have the best of results in race number 3, picking up a 4th place. Of course, fantastic to be in the top 5, but only taking away 41.5 points. It means he finds himself 1 point down Dylan in 84.5 points in that 3rd place in the championship. But the driver who gained the most, who I'm not sure is actually on track at the moment, was Ark Iman, who we will introduce. In fact, he is here. He's just sitting in the pit lane at the moment with his race engineers. With the Porsche 962 as well, the British driver was the one to benefit most from the misfortunes of others in the battle for the top 5 in the championship, in the fact that whilst he was able to only pick up what was a rather solitary 7th place in race number 1 in round 2, he then went on to have a phenomenal string of results. In race number 2, he picked up a 1st place, and in race number 3, he picked up 1st once again, seeing him gain 43 points, only 2nd to Olaf in terms of number of points gained in the previous round, and that puts him on 74 points, so quite some way out of being in contention for the championship win here. But still, being what is 21.5 points behind, you can imagine that Iman, if he can pull off a good string of results tonight, will see himself battling against Ukrainian guy, also known as Yaya, and also Dylan Cliff. You can imagine he could be getting in the fight for 3rd and 2nd. And who knows, if Olaf Biscuit drops 1 or 2 race results here, you could even see Iman being an outside contender. Now, after covering these guys, this is where things start to close up a little bit in terms of not the fight for the championship win, but in terms of the battle for the top 5, in terms of the final spot, that 5th place. In the fact that you have Clancy, who is from Austria, who I do not believe is currently out on circuit, so we're waiting for him to arrive. He's currently sitting on 61.5 points in P5, and we'll talk a little bit about him as we go a little bit deeper in. We then have Meccano7, our season 34 championship winner in EU Division 1, who's sitting on 60.5 points, so only 1 point between 5th and 6th. And then if we go further down, we'll notice in 7th is D31, who's sitting on 55.5 points. And D, well, having had an absolute disaster in race number 1, he turned it around rapidly with a rather legendary set of results therein, particularly race number 2, where things really came together. But again, D's not here at the moment, so we're not going to talk too much about D. The next driver, who is currently, well, I believe he's just turned up in the lobby and we're waiting for him to get out on circuit, is Chronicopal, sitting on 54 points in P8. And then the one driver who we actually do have out on circuit, I'm currently sitting at P9 and running in the Porsche 962 for the third and final time here, is Spalgasm. 44.5 points is his current tally. Didn't have the best of results last time out in round number 2, although he did have a good opening race with 10 points being accrued for his 5th place. After that, it started to fall apart a little bit for Spalgasm, picking up a rather weak string of results, particularly in the final race where it just did not come together, and he picked up 7.5 points in the bonus point round. And that was unfortunate because he seemed to be building some momentum, particularly after race number 1, so find himself on 44.5 points. But if he has one very strong result here, who knows what Spalgasm will be able to do in terms of getting himself all the way up into contention for 5th place in the championship. And that's why it's so important tonight for all 5 of the drivers who I've just mentioned, from P5 all the way down to P9, for all of them to try and aim for consistent race results and trying to maximise the points in 1 or 2. Because if they can, then they've got a very good chance of jumping over other drivers and potentially even securing their place in the final standings. Then we come over to our current lobby steward and our lobby host, and that is MDC. Currently sitting 10th in the championship in the Porsche 962, MDC has a total of 31.5 points and had a better set of results in round number 2. Particularly picking up 6 points in race 1 and 9 points in race 3, so it was another 6 points for 50% added on. MDC is starting to find a little bit of momentum there, pretty much doubling the tally he took from round number 1 in round number 2, going from 12.5 to 19, and sitting on that 31.5 points now. MDC is still continuing to find some momentum, although speaking to him prior to tonight's races, what he was saying is he does not feel too happy with his overall pace at the moment at Le Mans or de la Sarthe compared to other drivers. But then again, this track has such a long lap, much like St. Croix, it's all about being consistent and not making mistakes, as well as having that natural 1 lap or multi-lap pace. But we do have a massive battle ongoing for 10th in the championship, because MDC is leading that battle, but only 1.5 points down right now is Eclipse from the Netherlands, the Dutchman, running in the 962, all 962 machines at the moment from what we can see. He's sitting on 30 points. Eclipse having a very good start to round number 2 with 9 points for a 6th place finish, but then it all seemed to fall apart in rounds 2 and 3. In fact, he only picked up a total of 5 points from those, from those races in races 2 and 3. So Eclipse has got a lot of work to do today to try and find the points to overhaul MDC. Although it's 1.5 points in the standings, but every point counts. And then 2.5 points down from him is the German of De Gret. And Gret had a very similar story really to Eclipse in that it never seemed to really come together in round number 2. His best points haul being 6 points in race number 2. And he'll be looking to try and improve, running around in the Porsche 962. We've also got KLS1, who is out on circuit at the moment. He's currently sitting in the pits, also in the 962C. Everybody's seemingly going for the Porsche here. And KLS1 sitting on at 23.5 points. Had a reasonable set of results last time out, albeit maintaining consistent form with round number 1, but probably hoping to get a few more points on the board. In fact, he's on 23.5, so he's going to have to put in the greatest amount of labour here in order to increase his overall points and try to jump MDC into that 10th place along with his other competitors. And our 14th driver for EU Division 1, who I believe is still not running tonight, is Valave, who has only raced in round number 1 and only picked up a single point due to the fact that he had to retire after races 2 and 3 in that instance. So that's the story really in terms of the point standings, and when some of our other drivers turn up, of course we will introduce them. Now, what a little bit about the circuit, as we say, welcome to Jerry Racecar Driver in the chat, and also VinSim01. Hope you guys are doing well. So the track we're at tonight is, as I mentioned earlier, Le Mans, the 24-hour legendary French circuit where heroes have been made and legends have arisen. And one of the most notable legends, of course, particularly seeing as we're running Group C machines, albeit you will not see that car out on circuit today most likely, is the Mazda 787B for its infamous win in Le Mans in '91, where it astounded a lot of individuals, but there's a massive story to that and we won't go into it. But it came home with the win. Now we're going to jump on board with Yaya777 here as he takes us round a lap, and as we get underway then. So, running down the start-finish straight towards turn number 1 then, a high-speed right-hander to begin with. He's going to be just simply planting it on the throttle, going from left to right here, right-hander cutting as tight to the apex curve as possible, and then he's going to have to stamp down on the brakes here for the opening chicane turns 2 and 3, before going underneath the Dunlop overhead here, the advertising board for Dunlop tyres. And he's already picked up a half-second penalty for cutting. We'll talk more about those cuts. Turns 4 and 5 also create a new set of chicane, if you will. And you've got turn 6 to come out here, so turn 6. And then you've got Tetra Rouge here, which marks turn 7, before leading onto the Mulsanne Straight. A very difficult corner, turn number 7, Tetra Rouge, in the fact that you want to go through there as quickly as possible, because every mile an hour you have through Tetra Rouge matters on the Mulsanne Straight. Now, coming down the straight here, got a very long run. You're going to see the cars going up to their highest speeds down this straight, with it being split into 3 parts compared to the original no chicane variant of the circuit. You've got turns 8 and 9 coming up right now, the first of 2 chicanes to split up the straight into 3 parts. He's going to be braking at about the 100 board here, coming all the way down to second gear and snapping the car through 9 as hard as possible before jumping back through turn 10 here. And now beginning the second part of the Mulsanne Straight, charging down here once again, going up through the gears. It's a pretty much standard procedure, rinse and repeat. And as he's coming charged down the straight here, the second part of the Mulsanne, he's got another chicane coming up, which will be a left to right to left combination. And you'll see that he's going to brake from approximately 205 miles an hour, looking for that 100 board on the right-hand side, and then snapping down through the gears, hard on the brakes here, rotating the car as much as possible to go from outside to inside, and now charging down the third part of the Mulsanne Straight, which includes the little right-hander here known as the Mulsanne King. And he's coming up to the end of the straight now, a very heavy braking zone about to occur, where you've got a severe right-hander which takes the drivers on to the Gulf Straight. Now the Gulf Straight is not as long as the Mulsanne Straight combined, but it's still a very long straight, and then leads on to effectively what is the second half of the circuit, one could argue, as he comes through the corner here now to begin the Gulf Straight. And you can imagine, you've been on multiple straights, well now you've got a very long one which takes you all the way up to one of the trickiest, if not the trickiest corner on the circuit in a number of drivers' opinions, including my own, and that is Indianapolis. A right-hander into a left-hander where you've got to brake through the right-hander and have confidence you can plant the car on the brakes. Now the Gulf Straight involves one little minor kink, as you see there, followed by another little minor kink, as he's now coming up into Indianapolis, and he's going to brake as hard as possible into the left-hander that is Indianapolis here. Coming down to second gear, being obstructed a little bit by KLS1 here, but these guys are both practicing at the moment. And you can see now coming into the right-hander to begin another long run, which kicks off the run effectively into a whole set of chicanes or curves, high-speed curves if you will, which starts off with the Porsche curves. So we're going to have this long run down the straight here as KLS1 is drag racing and then backs out of it, because it's only really one way through here. So the Porsche curves coming up, it's a right into left where you've got this extended right-hander where you've got to have that confidence to throw the car into each corner and then follow through the Porsche curves. We're following up left and now into a right-hander before going in to the Corvette curves here, where you've got this very tricky left-hander which is a blind apex and a blind exit, where you only see those as you're going through the corner. And now we're coming up to the final pair of chicanes and also the pit entry on the right hand side. We're passing the pit entry, so we've got a medium speed chicane to kick off, and then we're coming down to the final chicane known as, I believe, the Ford chicanes, and really that completes the lap. Thank you for that wonderful demonstration from Yaya there. That was a very nice demonstration, and that is Le Saf in a Group C machine in a nutshell. An absolutely crazy one. And I should point out some of the other corner names that we didn't mention. For example, the corner at the end of the triple Mulsanne Straights is known as Virage de Mulsanne, on the Mulsanne corner. And then coming out of Indianapolis, you have got that right-hander known as Arnage. But we've covered everything for the time being in terms of the track, and let's just see if any other drivers have arrived on circuit. Well, we can introduce Mr. Cryonic Opal. And in fact, we do have a Mazda 787B from 1991. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see the Le Mans legend roar. Just hear that rotary engine. Phenomenal engine. And well, Cryonic, the Australian driver, where does he currently sit in the standings? That is a big question. He currently finds himself on 54 points in P8. He had a stronger set of results in round number 2 compared to round number 1. His best result in round number 2 being race 1, a P4, and it went a little bit backwards from there, but you can imagine If anyone's going to extract anything out of the car, it'll be the Australian here. And you've got to keep in mind that with regards to the bouncer performance, the Mazda 787B does have a straight line speed advantage over the Porsche 962, albeit it loses out a little bit in the corners, but from Kranjc's perspective, he will be looking to maximise his speed down the Mulsanne straight and also the Gulf straight. For that, the top speed of the Mazda 787B based on standard bouncer performance, if I remember correctly, is in the region of about 230 miles an hour. It's only pipped by the Nissan R92C, which I doubt you're going to see anybody feature here because it is a car so orientated to the straights and has a lot of understeer. But let's just turn on the telemetry and we'll give you a feel for how fast Kranjc's going to be coming down into each of the braking zones on the Mulsanne. So already up to 190 as he's now making his way onto the freeway. And just building that speed, already up to 200. And remember, Yaya, by comparison, when we're following on board, well, he was hitting approximately 200 at the braking zones, 205. Kranjc, meanwhile, at 216 before braking, and that is a huge differential of 10 miles an hour on the straights. It doesn't sound like much, particularly when you think of a road car, but in these cars, for how long they're going to be running up at those speeds, that is a huge difference. Of course, the converse will be that Kranjc will suffer more in the second half of the circuit, particularly through the different curves, whether it be the Porsche, the Corvette curves, alternatively the Ford chicanes. That's where the handling of the Porsche 962 will come to its foray. But you can see coming down into the second chicane on the Mulsanne straight, 210 miles an hour there compared to what was 205 for the Porsche 962 reference lap. And now coming on to the final section of the Mulsanne straight, and let's see what top speed he's going to be able to achieve here. He's charging down and he's going to be coming up to the kink very shortly, building ever more speed here and continuing to go. And welcome to Stanley in the chat, hope you're doing well. But continue to build that speed, and you can see now to 206 before the braking point there, nailing it. And that will be the advantage that the Mazda 787B has. And we've introduced Kranjc, so have we got any other drivers to introduce? Well, we do have Iman, who we talked about earlier. He's now out on circuit, putting in some warm-up laps here and getting some reference times in. But those are really all of our drivers at the moment in terms of following drivers around the circuit. We've still obviously got a few minutes to see if anybody else is joining, but it may be the case that we've only got 10 running tonight, which if so, that is a little bit unfortunate. We're perhaps hoping for a couple more drivers, but we do have 10 at the moment on circuit and in the lobby. Now, some of you may be wondering as well, what's the situation with regards to the team championship, which is always a good question. As we just double check with our steward list, with our lead steward here, just to make sure that we can see everybody. So you just have to give us 2 seconds, folks. We're just going to get MDC to confirm that we can see 10 drivers. So we're just putting out for our confirmation, and we are eagerly awaiting the next update. But in the meantime then, so what about those team standings, the all important ones, not only for our individual drivers but the constructors? Well, the story here is that, as we take a look down, is that we have 2 drivers who are effectively both competing for the overall championship win and competing within the same team as we get our first start check underway. So Dylan Clift and also Olaf Biscuit, both part of Team 7. Team 7 is currently leading away by a huge margin with 181 points, and they have got a significant gap over Team 6, who sit in P2 in the championship standings. Team 6 consisting of Iman and Klein C1978. Those guys on 135.5 points. Then in P3 in the standings of the championship, it is the Shift Racing team consisting of KLS1 and Yaya sitting on 108 points. They may be looking to usurp Team 6 for P2, depending on how Team 6 do in the opening round. And we don't have Kleinsee here, of course, at the moment, so it could be the case that actually Iman has everything on his shoulders to carry Team 6 through to the final standings in the P2 position. We just had it in from our race steward as they're getting the stock checks underway. We do appear to have everybody getting away here safe and sound. We may be expecting an 11th driver here, but so far there's only 10 drivers. So they're all just coming in to the opening chicane as part of the stock check sequence, and we're going to back out there so that way we can close down the practice race. It is indeed just 10 at the moment, Robert, and good evening to you. We're expecting an 11th driver potentially, but we're just waiting to hear what's happening with that. Outside of, as we switch back into the lobby then, with more drivers now heading back out into the circuit. In the wider team standings then, with Shift Team trying to get into P2, you could say that Team 3, who sit in P4 on 98.5 points, so they're only 9.5 points off the Shift Racing team. Team 3, consisting of Spalgazin and Cryonic Opal, have a great opportunity here to close the gap on P3 in the championship standings for the constructors. Now they in turn are only 8 points ahead of team number 1, who consists of McCann and Eclipse, but McCann not being here, it means that everything falls onto the shoulders of Elite Eclipse in order to try and gain as many points as possible to overcome that deficit to team 3. And then they themselves, team 1, have only got 3.5 points over team 2, who sit at 87 points in P6 in the championship standings to constructors, with D31 and MDC making up that team. D not being here at the moment, so MDC has it all in himself to deliver. And then sitting last in the constructors is team number 4, consisting of Valive and De Great. Well, Valive is not turning up, we believe, so as a result it's on De Great to try and gain some points. And whilst I do not think that that gap to team number 2 is going to be overcome tonight, unless De Great has an absolutely fantastic set of results here, he'll be looking to do as best as he possibly can to close that gap up for the conclusion of the championship. So really, the team standings are quite close. There's a lot to be decided with regards to who finishes in P2 all the way down to P6. I think we do have our runaway winner in Team 7 in first in the constructor standings, but never say never as we get underway with Stuck Check number 2. So what you can imagine here is we've got the faraway camera shot. As we've got that faraway camera shot with the grid start, is that our race leader, or sorry, our qualifying leader, our qualifying pole sitter, will be starting on what is the right hand side of the picture, and then we'll have second place on the left hand side. A lot of carnage on the takeoff there, but I think our drivers, some of them are probably just having a bit of a giggle to kick things off, whilst other drivers will use this, of course, as a clear plastic practice start in order to get a feel for what it's like to get off the line and also have the run up through turn 1 up into turns 2 and 3, which make that first chicane. Now that first chicane is a bit of a difficult one, particularly turn number 3, because you can very easily pick up a penalty. And the reason for that is the track limit, particularly on the apex curb of turn number 3, is defined as you must have 2 wheels on or inside the white line that dictates the track limits. You cannot cut the curb like you would at other corners around this circuit or in other circuits according to track limits in GT Sport. Instead, you have to keep 2 wheels on the white line or within the track limits, otherwise you are due to pick up at least a half-second penalty. And that's what you saw with Yaya's reference lap as we're following the Porsche driver around, is that he picked up a half-second penalty for cutting the curb of turn 3, and it's very easy to do. I've done it personally in an FIA Manufacturer Series race back in 2019. You can get very greedy with your curb cutting, and this is one of those tracks where the track limits are much more finicky compared to others. They're not as exploitable or as reliable in terms of knowing where if you cut enough of a curb you can get away with it. Here it is a case that you will be punished if you do run beyond the curbs quite often. Even if it is the chicanes that dictate the Mulsanne Straight, you can imagine that both pairs of chicanes actually have some rather strenuous track limits where you want to really stay inside, because if you wander even a little bit outside you can sometimes find yourself being impacted with a half-second to a second penalty. You can see Spalgazin there and a really nice run out of the first chicane. But we're waiting at the moment, and well, we're getting more confirmation that everybody's only seen a total of 11 individuals, including myself as commentator and 10 drivers in the lobby. And we're just going to confirm with some other drivers who are reporting that. But it's going to be a little bit of a quiet one in terms of volume of cars out on track, because we're not going to have the full roster here. But of course the alternative will be that our drivers here will all be thirsty for the points and will be looking to get the best possible result over the 3 races. So it will be a close one nonetheless. I'm sure we're going to expect tons of action, particularly with the weak slipstream setting, meaning that our drivers will gain on other drivers running in the dirty air behind another car as it punches its way through the air in front of them. That slipstream zone is 2.25 seconds, and they will only gain dramatically as they get closer and closer. And down these straights, that could make a huge difference. And I really reckon that the Australian Chronic Opal with the Mazda 787B will be the one to watch on any straight here, simply because that Mazda has got huge legs by comparison with some of the other cars. But we will find out. We've got 5 minutes to go before we get underway with qualifying, and really it's time for those of you tuning in to start making your predictions in terms of who you think is going to reign on top. Personally for me, I think we are going to see a very close competition between Olaf Biscuit, Dylan Cliff, and because Clancy's not here, that means we will also see outside of those two, Yaya get into the mix. I think those three will be fighting over the wins here, although Iman, again, don't rule out Iman. He has been in amongst the fray, particularly in round number 2. So I think we've got 4 drivers all competing for the top spots, i.e. the podium and the race win, but we're still going to have quite a bunch of battles further down, and the one to watch out for will be Krynik Opel. Will his switch of car choice here to go to the Mazda 787B prove a smart choice? Alternatively, will it not work out? Of course, the Porsche 962C has been the dominant car throughout EU Division 1 this season. It seems to have had a little bit of everything. It's not been the most powerful car in a particular regard, but it has been the jack of all trades that can be tuned to fit the circuit, and where you do have to wonder whether some of our expert tuners here will have done it once again and applied enough magic to find their way around the potential advantages of other cars. As we welcome Smokehouse to the chat, and we hope you're doing well, Smokehouse. We can also see Dylan Cliff has quickly popped in. Dylan, you've got a race to be getting to, so I wouldn't stay in here for too long, but it's good to see you pop in here, and we wish you and all the other drivers, of course, good luck for tonight. So we're just going to take a very quick sip of water as we're counting down. Only 4 minutes to go right now. Now, in terms of overtaking points here, there's a lot of potential overtaking points. But the thing about this circuit in particular is that, of course, for getting penalties, you do not want to pick the wrong place to overtake. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you may be thinking, okay, if you can get a good run out of turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, then going up into Tetra Rouge, if you get a better run than the driver ahead of you as you go onto the Mulsanne Straight, well, you might have the opportunity to overtake. But of course, there's just one problem with that approach. Because we've got 3 parts to Mulsanne Straight and you've got such a slipstream zone, as is being demonstrated right now between Spalgazan and Olaf Biscuit, where you can imagine that Olaf right now is approximately 1.5 seconds back on his fellow countrymen, but you can see he is gaining and gaining and gaining as they come up to the breaking point for the second chicane on the Mulsanne Straight. Well, the thing is, do you really want to have just overtaken someone out of Tetra Rouge as you come onto the straight, or do you want to be getting closer and closer through the chicanes and then lining them up for Virage de Mulsanne or the Mulsanne corner as you then go onto the Gulf Straight and head towards Indianapolis? Of course, you also have this situation whereby, well, actually, you may not want to go for the move as you go into the Gulf Straight or as you come out the Mulsanne corner. In fact, you may want to go for the move down the Gulf Straight because you know that into Indianapolis, it's a lot harder to go side by side into Indianapolis than it is coming out of this corner that we just left, the Mulsanne corner, and you now come onto the Gulf Straight. And you can see Olaf, I think he's practicing this technique already, whereby look how close he's getting now as they're coming down through the Gulf Straight and up into Indianapolis. He's getting closer and closer, and you can imagine what he'd want to do. By the time he gets that second kink in the straight, he would want to go for the move, because as soon as you get to Indianapolis here, you literally have to narrow it down to a single race 9. Can you go too wide there? Yep, you definitely can. And if you think you've got a pace advantage and you think the driver is going to respect the fact that you're going to try and come around the outside or cover the inside, well, then it can be the case you can go for a move. But it's so risky because it just takes one driver on the inside to get their braking and the control of their car wrong, and then they'll send themselves plus yourself off the circuit. Now, you've got Arnage, which is a good overtaking point as well, but remember, you've got a very long straight here down towards the Porsche curves, and Spalgazan is now showing that in the fact that he's running so close to Olaf Biscuit and making little feints and picks and pops at trying to get past Olaf here. And I think these guys are using one another's practice tool here, and it's great for us because they're giving us examples of overtaking positions. Of course, we've now got the Corvette curves coming up, and here you can't really attack, and you do want to be the lead driver through the Corvette curves, particularly the curve we just come through, simply because the track limits there. If you run all 4 wheels beyond that curve on the exit, you are going to pick up at least a second penalty, if not a 1.5 second penalty. And really, it's that dirty air which invokes understeer through those corners, which means you lose out as you then come onto the start-finish straight after the 4 chicanes. And that is important because you need to think about essentially, right, where do I overtake so as to give myself then an advantage to pull away from my opponent? And really, you want to get your overtake done by the time you're building up to Indianapolis on that Gulf Straight, and then unless you can make a complete hash out of Arnage, you should be able to run away. If you can run away, then you should be able to essentially creep off, and as you go on to the next lap, you've just got to nail the first 7 corners, and then on the Mulsanne Straight, if your opponent's not in the slipstream zone, then you can start to pull away. That is the focus, and I think that's what drivers like Olaf Biscuit will be looking to do here. They'll be looking to try and extract as much time as possible in the second half of the circuit, because they know if they can't break that slipstream zone when they come onto the Mulsanne straight, then all the hard work they complete coming up to Tetra Rouge will be undone simply because the guy behind them will be gaining down the straight through the aerodynamic effects. And we will have qualifying. We've just been confirmed, ladies and gentlemen. Qualifying will be coming up after one final start check. So we haven't got long to wait now, so just brace yourself a little bit. Now's the time. If you've got a minute, go grab a glass of water, take that quick toilet break, go get some popcorn if you've got a bag of it, because we haven't got long. We're going to get one start check underway, so in a minute qualifying will be starting and we'll see who's going to be on pole for race one. But of course, before we do that, start check. Now, noting that our odd number drivers in terms of grid positions are on the right of your picture and the even numbers on the left of your picture, being on pole may not be the best thing here. You will have the outside line into one, you'll have the inside line into two, but you've got to try and nail that start, because otherwise you're going to have to go ultra defensive into the opening chicane, and that'll cost you a lot of time here because you really do want to come from an outside to inside line into turns 2 and 3. Taking a tight defensive line into turn 2, i.e. the opening chicane, will cost you a huge amount of time. As everybody gets underway successfully here, so the final start check has been successful, and as they all charge up through turn 1 and up into turn 2 then, I think this time they're all going to be taking this start a little bit more seriously, because you can see nobody's throwing the car across the circuit here, and they'll all need to practice that start, as I believe Dylan Cliff will be picking up what is a half-second penalty there for a little bit of a cut on the chicane, although he may not have been given. I think he might have just been within the limits, but you can see they all got through cleanly there. Everybody's now settling down into the race scenario, and it's going to be important. That's that final bit of practice, and without further ado then, well, as soon as MDC announces it, we will be getting underway with our opening qualifying session. I believe all of our drivers are immediately pouring out onto the circuit right now. So the lead driver who's going to be taking everybody away for 12 minutes of qualifying will be Olaf Biscuit, as we bring all of the information up on screen for you so you can see exactly how all of our drivers are doing and what the deltas are and whatnot. But good luck to all of our drivers, and here I get the feeling that everybody will want to be as far up the grid as possible, simply because it's going to be a case of slipstream trains are vital at this circuit. If our drivers are able to form into little packs, they will want to use one another's slipstreams to try and gain, and of course that could be critical in terms of tactics over the race. Races 1 and 2, the shorter sprint races, are 3 laps long, and then our endurance race, or our pit stop mandated race, race number 3, is 6 laps long. So these are going to be short lap numbers, but long race distances in terms of the circuit at hand. And you can see already all of our drivers will be starting to space out as they come to the end of the Mulsanne, but of course, given that the lap here is approximately 3.5 minutes long, give or take, I think all of our drivers as well will want to try and get around as quickly as possible on this out lap, simply because they're only going to be able to get in a maximum of about 3 qualifying laps here if they don't go for a pit stop. And I think some of our faster drivers will simply bank on that, or what they'll do, they'll try and get around as quickly as possible for the opening 2 laps, and then immediately come into the pits at the end of lap 2, and then make a massive investment on one big fast lap. That is all the training. If you're in my shoes, personally, what I would say is I'm going to do 2 laps. I'd do my out lap, and then go for a banker lap, and then I would, unless I've made a mistake on my banker, I'd immediately go again and put in 1 more lap. And then if I still feel as though the tyres have got the pace and the overall control, I'd potentially go for a 3rd lap, but I'd look to not come in for any fresh tyres. I'd simply put in 2 laps and that would be it. But again, that's me. Some of our drivers here may be feeling a little bit different. As we look further down the field, we can already see that MDC is just gradually making his way along the Mulsanne straight now. And I don't think he's doing too much fuel burning here, but he's just taking his time down the straight, giving some space to the other drivers. And I think you can see what MDC is doing here. He's actually lifting into the chicanes, and this is him conserving tyres as he's running half speed in, and you can see he's just applying full brake initially, and then he's just eking those brakes on about 25 to 50%, because I think what MDC's plan is he's going to use 1 set of tyres for all of his qualifying laps, so he'll want to protect these tyres as much as possible. Now you could ask, well, why is he not fuel burning? Well, to fuel burn, you're going to cost yourself and turn your out lap from what is approximately 4 minutes in length to 6 minutes or so if you're fuel burning all the way around the circuit, and MDC will not want to do that. So you can see the different strategies being employed by drivers here, but we do have two drivers who are running away up front in terms of track position, and none other than Olaf Biscuit, who's running away right at the front of the pack right now and getting ready to start his opening qualifying lap, to which we will jump on board and we will see what Olaf can do. So coming into the forward chicanes then, he's got to nail this final chicane to get the best possible run, cutting nicely over the entrance curve there. A good run out that chicane, that means he's going to get the optimal run up into turn 2 in terms of top speed. And now the lap begins. So up into 4th gear, taking a nice wide line here, not putting 2 wheels beyond the white line on the left hand side. You can do that, but you put dirt on the tyres as Iman comes into the pits. Going down to 2nd gear for the Dunlop chicane then, and getting it very nice and tight through turns 2 and 3. Now coming in the rundown through 4 into 5 and 6, and what you can imagine here, he's going to try and absolutely nail it going up into Tetra Rouge. It's going to be critical to get a good round out of 6 and now nail that braking point for Tetra Rouge, and he's going to get it done nicely here. Turns in immediately in 3rd gear using the full track limits there. You can run all the way up to the white line with all 4 wheels, and so long as you keep 2 wheels on that white line or the curve, you'll be safe. But he's had a really good opening sector here, Olaf Biscuit, and now charging down the first bit of the Mulsanne straight. Of course, it's going to go a bit quiet right now. Spalgazen's not too far behind out on circuit, probably about 5 seconds behind on circuit. About 4 seconds I should say. These two drivers trying to get in as many laps as possible as he comes down to that first chicane. Now he hits the apex curve there for the entry, tucks onto the apex curve for the main part of the chicane, and that was a very nice clean line through there using the full track limits, and now getting on that power once again and charging up towards the second chicane that splits that Mulsanne. Now as he's coming down here, of course, he'll be thinking to himself at this point that he's had a good opening lap so far. He just needs to keep the focus there and continue to nail it. Coming up to about 205 miles an hour before starting to break 207, 208, and now coming down through the gears, 2nd gear, trailing in on the brakes there before upping the brake a little bit because of the main curb there of the chicane, and getting that quite planted. And no real hesitation there, seems to have a lot of confidence in the car. The tyres are already feeling a bit away. You can see on the tyre chart we're starting to see some very minor graining on that rear right in particular. And now coming up to the Mulsanne corner, it's just going to be a simple case of getting it turned in and brake as hard as possible using the full width of the track there. Missed a little bit of the entry curve there, and you can see it's just a little bit slow. I think he broke a bit too soon, Biscuit, by comparison with what he planned to do there, because you could see some hesitation as he was rotating it through the curve, and that's cost him probably in the region of about 2 to 3 attempts in terms of he didn't get the best run onto the Gulf Straight. Now, of course, he can make up a lot of time if he nails Indianapolis and Arnage and also the Porsche curves. So there's a lot of time still to go as he's come up into Indianapolis now. Now, will he be fully confident and brake through the turn-in? And he does indeed. He goes to half brake before full brake and nailing it very nice, using the medium tyres grip to full advantage and run out onto the exit curve now into Arnage, braking at about the 100 board there, coming down to 1st gear before upshifting to 2nd. Now, that's important to note. He's not confident to run the car in 1st gear in terms of getting on the power. He's using 1st gear just to simply rotate the car through Arnage there before using an upshift to 2nd to settle the car before getting on the power. Now it comes up to the Porsche curves. He's going to have to attack this fully out here in order to get that best possible lap time. He's going to cut as much of the opening curve as possible. Not getting the best connection on the opening curve of the Porsche curves, but now coming up into the Chevrolet curves here, it's going to be whether all the time is won or lost, particularly through this left-hander. Will he nail it and keep it within track limits? Good entry. Didn't quite get on the power as much as perhaps he could have there, but that was about 95% of what you could potentially do. A very good run. And now come up to the forward chicanes. He's just got to nail the braking point for both of these chicanes. It's looking very good this lap, and I think this is going to be a very good reference lap because he has pulled away from Spalgazen, and as he comes across the line, the Olaf Biscuit is going to be a 3:19.9. I heard in practice we were looking at potentially 3:18.9s, but there's so much lap time in the circuit. Spalgazen comes across with a 3:24 that really he's put himself in a world of his own, Biscuit, right now. He's done very well in terms of the lap time there. And now Eclipse, meanwhile, getting it all sorts of wrong through the forward chicanes. And as he comes out the final chicane then, you can see he's going to come across the line with a 3:26. That's quite down. Now, how will Iman do here? Although it looks as though, actually, because Iman pitted, this is an outlap. So, Iman is now going to be on his opening qualifying lap, so we'll keep our eyes on that. Dylan Cliff comes across the line with a 3:20.1 by looks of things. So, a little bit off of Olaf, but making a good contention for that P1 position. And Gueret's going to come across the line with a 3:24.3, which puts him up into P3 right now, but there's plenty of lap time remaining as we've got Karts and Aman already picking up a half-second penalty through the Dunlop chicane, so he's going to have to abort that lap immediately. That's a disaster. KLS1 coming across the line there with a 3:22.8, and Yaya now coming across to start an opening qualifying lap. So he also went for a similar strategy to Iman in terms of pitting after the opening out lap in order to simply try and get the best possible times and the least amount of fuel for going for those final 2 qualifying laps. Now MDC of course will be coming through here to complete his opening lap. How will he do? I think he was expecting 3:24s from what I heard from him before we went into this race, and he is going to be on a 3:25.1. So not a bad opening lap by MDC. I think he'll feel happy with that one, and as it'll build his confidence and he can look to achieve just a little bit better as they go into the final couple of qualifying laps. I think MDC, if he's quick, will get in one more qualifying lap after this, but of course the problem will be that he is going to have some heavily worn tyres should he go for a 3rd qualifying lap. So MDC is going to have to think about this one. Does he go all in now, or does he save his chips and then go for one final lap and see if he can improve? But of course, one driver who will not be improving right now, or at least will not be setting the biggest lap, and in fact, he's had an even bigger penalty accrued, so he's definitely gone wide through Tetra Rouge. That is the only time you'd pick up such a penalty increase, would be by going wide out of Tetra Rouge, because you normally pick up a 1 to 1.5 second penalty through there. And Iman is having a disastrous qualifying session right now, and in his mindset, what you can imagine, he's going to be saying right now, right, we've got to abort this lap, and we've just got to get it round and do one lap. It is going to be all on one lap for Iman here. And Yaya right now, of course, also on his 1st qualifying lap, and this is the risk because you've got so few qualifying laps available to you. The risk here is that if you go for that single lap and you make even one mistake, then you could find yourself, despite the fact you may have the pace to be on pole, you'll be right at the back. And I can tell you from experience in an FIA race, ladies and gentlemen, I had the pace to be on pole back in 2019 in manufacturers, and I ended up starting P7 because I picked up a 2-second penalty at Tetra Rouge. And it is absolutely infuriating when you think in your mind that you should be right up the front and then you've got all the work to do in the race itself. But actually a surprise, and somebody who we haven't talked about, folks, is Chronic Opal, who finds himself in P3 after the 1st round of laps, sitting on a 3:22.6. But coming around then to complete his 2nd qualifying lap is Olaf Biscuit, and we're hearing it is purple across the board. This looks to be a 3:18 perhaps as he comes across the line then. Not quite a 3:18, a 3:19.6, so improving by 2.5 tenths. Olaf really setting the standard here in terms of those qualifying laps. As Spalgazin is now coming out to complete his 2nd qualifying lap. A 3:24.9 was his reference marker. Is he able to improve on that 3:24.9? Doesn't look like it this time around, but he will have one more lap, of course, because he's given himself that grace. But now he will have some tyre wear in the car, but with less fuel in the car, only about 70 litres compared to about the 80 he would have finished that lap on. You can imagine that he will gain a bit more time down the straights, but looking at further around, we can see that our next driver to come across the line will be Iman, who of course, having picked up those penalties, has now got it all to do, and his opening lap will be heavily compromised. His opening qualifying lap, quote unquote, will be a 3:28. That shows you how far down those penalties have put him in terms of time. Now coming across the line is Garrett, who's improved to a 3:22.5. Or actually, I believe that was... No, he has improved to that. And then we've got Chronic Opal, who's coming to the end of another lap. But he did lift off down the Gulf Straight to let drivers through. So he's going for one final lap. And we can see that MDC right now is on a personal best by the looks of things in terms of our timing screens as all of our other drivers come through. Dylan, we should note, by the way, folks, has not improved because he was using that previous lap to burn fuel. As he's picked up... Hold on a second. Dylan has picked up a half-second penalty at turn 3. So that means Dylan will not be improving on this lap unless he has a monster of a lap that can offset the penalty. But meanwhile, MDC coming to the end then of his 2nd qualifying lap. Will MDC improve to a 3:24? It's going to be close, and I don't think he's done enough, but he will get one final lap. So all of our drivers now on their final qualifying lap, and already we can hear that Olaf is improving. He's going purple once again. So the Biscuit Baron himself is charging down the Mulsanne straight, coming into Mulsanne corner here, and you can see now he is building that confidence. He made that mistake on the opening lap. This time he takes a lot more width to the Mulsanne corner, and by doing so it gives him just a little bit of advantage. He's 600ths up on his previous best, and I think Olaf here could be on for an absolute cracker of a final lap. I don't think it's going to be a 3:18, but I think this could be moving in towards the lower end of the 3:19s. Perhaps we're looking at a 3:19.4 here if Olaf gets it all hooked up. Now looking further afield, with Dylan having that half-second penalty, he'll be kicking himself because he'll be wondering, what could I have done if I've been able to not pick up that penalty, but still, I think Dylan's in a good place right now to pick up that P2 in qualifying, but we'll wait and find out. We've got Garrett, who seems to have gone off track at the first of the Mulsanne chicanes, so he is out of his qualifying session. So his best lap, that 3:22.5, is putting him in provisional P3. But Chronic Opal right now on another lap, and the fact that Chronic Opal is only 800ths off of Garrett, we could be seeing a little surprise here from our Mazda 787B driver, and so far he's improved by 800ths, so this could be enough to knock Garrett off of P3 in the qualifying standings. But meanwhile, further around the field, we've got Olaf Biscuit coming towards the end of his lap, and we've got one driver who's parked up in the pits. That's MDC, so he has stopped qualifying. He's not improved anymore, and he's parked it up in the garage. So I think MDC suspects that he's going to be starting right towards the back to put it up there. But meanwhile, coming to the end of his final qualifying lap then is Olaf Biscuit, and this is looking very strong. Is it going to be another improvement? And it is an improvement to a 3:19.4 as we predicted. So that is a phenomenal qualifying lap by Olaf. Now, can anybody beat it? I don't think so, but we'll just see what everybody's able to do. Spalgazan will be the next driver to come around. Currently sitting on that 3:24.9. Quite a gap between himself and Cryonic, but can he put a bit more space between himself and KLS1, who's currently sitting 1.2 seconds down? It's looking a good end to lap, but he will have gone sideways there, and that's cost him significant time, but that puts him in P3, and I think Spalgazan will be hoping that, well, wondering to himself, if only he hadn't made that mistake, that would have been approximately about 2 to 3 tenths faster if he hadn't made that mistake. But then coming through in terms of the next drivers out on circuit, we've got Iman coming to the end of his qualifying lap, but remember, things have gone wrong so far, so can he improve here significantly? And it is a 3:20.8, putting him up into P2, with Dylan Cliff having to abort his lap effectively because of the penalty. Looking further around them, we've got Chronic Opal still coming through, we've got Eclipse coming through at this point. Our next driver to come to the end of their qualifying lap will be, I believe it is KLS1, and at the moment sitting on a 3:26.1, so quite far down. This is going to be a sizable improvement as Eclipse also comes to the end of his lap and does not improve, and KLS1 improves and pips Eclipse, and behind him I think Yaya has jumped up into P2 of a 3:20.3, which puts him all the way nicely into that P2 position. And will there be any more from Cryonic? He set a 3:21.0, which means he's jumped up into P5, so there's a lot of chop and change. And in fact, we should point out here, now, in terms of drivers, Dylan was able to get up into P3, so he improved despite that half-second penalty. So, qualifying standings in the end, our pole sitter is Olaf Biscuit with that 3:19.4. Alongside him on the front row will be Yaya with that 3:20.3. Then the second row is starting with the Irishman of Dylan Cliff on a 3:20.8. Despite that half-second penalty, that's a phenomenal effort by the Irishman. And alongside him will be Iman, who set that 3:20.8. And I believe that Iman has completed his qualifying. I don't know if he's just driving around simply for reference at this point. And then starting the third row will be Chronic Opal from Australia with a 3:21.0, very close to Iman's lap and almost been on that second row. Spalgazan, his teammate, will be alongside him in P6 with a 3:21.5. Great effort by both of those drivers, doing very well to put themselves in locking out that third row. Then the German of Der Gerät will be in P7, starting off row number 4 on a 3:22.5, joined alongside by KLS1 with that 3:24.9, and then the final row will be Elite Eclipse with what was a 3:26.3 in the end. And I believe MDC is going to be starting P10, although I'm not 100% sure about that, because he seemed to just cut away, and I think MDC actually might have found himself being faster than Eclipse, because he did set a 3:25.1 if I'm not mistaken, and if that time stands, then that would put him definitely P9. So either Eclipse or MDC will be P9. We'll wait to find out as everybody now comes off the circuit and we're about to get underway with race number 1 after all of our drivers get themselves set up and tuned in for the race trim. But a good qualifying session, and whilst qualifying was dominated by Olaf Biscuit, again, we have seen that trend of a number of drivers being close behind Olaf Biscuit in the form of Dylan Cliff, Iman, and this time what would be Chronic Opal. We've seen that come to the foray, and then there's a sizable gap down to the second half of the field where effectively you've then got that mass competition for P5 downwards. As we come out of our spectator camera briefly and await for a further instruction, I believe race number 1 will be getting underway within the next 2 to 3 minutes. But as we're waiting right now, start to place your predictions, of course, in terms of who is going to be our race winner. Oh, well, our race 1 winner, we should say, because we've got the 3 races. Personally, for me, I think Olaf is going to be a difficult one to beat, but at the same time, we have seen that The guys who qualify behind him, whether it's Yaya, alternatively Dylan, or Iman, they can put a lot of pressure on Olaf in the opening laps. And if they're able to do that, as we saw in races 2 and 3, in round 2 last time out, then we can have a very different winner by the end of the distance. I do not think qualifying is going to just dictate the race result here. I think that would be very inappropriate for us to make that assumption, as our drivers are just waiting then to get underway. So we've had our change in weather conditions. In fact, we've gone from early in the morning now to late in the morning. It is 11 o'clock, just coming up towards the lunchtime, local time 11. Which will be a bit odd, of course, because local time in the United Kingdom right now, it is 20 past 8 in the evening. So France has decided to move to a very different time zone. But as we're waiting for more drivers to get out on circuit then, race number 1 will be underway very, very soon. I think the one to watch out for, particularly if he has a good opening start in terms of Sector 1, if he can nail Sector 1, will be Chronic Opel. Because whilst he doesn't have it in the corners, that Mazda 787 definitely has a huge advantage on the straights, and you can expect that Chronic will look to utilise that so much because it will be critical. And welcome to Nightview, who's just joined in the chat. I hope you're doing well, good sir. And of course, if there is just even a half-second penalty, our burn zones for reference, ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 burn zones here today. We have 3 on the Mulsanne Straight, i.e. each section of the Mulsanne Straight dictates a burn zone. We also, just checking our stewarding notes here, we also have a burn zone which goes on to the start-finish straight. So as soon as you come out of the final Ford chicane, you are due to burn a penalty. And we also have a burn zone coming out of Arnage and one coming onto the Gulf Straight out of the Mulsanne corner. In fact, that makes 6 burn zones by my account if we do the finger maths, and that means, well, anything could happen. And we've got race number 1 about to get underway for your viewing pleasure. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, well, without further ado, we're just awaiting the countdown. But our big question, of course, will be for our championship leader, Olaf Biscuit, right now. Can he lead the field away and get away in race number 1? Or are we going to see a change of winner once again? Will we see Iman come to the foray or somebody completely different? We've only had 2 race winners in EU Division 1 so far. It's been between Olaf and Iman. Will we see a third? 3 laps, 10 minutes will be the deciding factor. On your right then, in your picture, it'll be Olaf Biscuit, and on the left, it will be Yaya. Behind them, Dylan Cliff and Iman respectively, but watch out for the Mazda 787 of Chronic Opel on the right-hand side on the 3rd row, and his teammate Spalgazan. Both of them looking to get a good result here today. And it's lights out and away they go. And it looks as though everybody's got a relatively good start here. Although we could see immediately, look at Chronic Opel going on a charge. Already up into P3 and placing himself on the outside of turn 1, but the inside for turn 2. And so long as he gets it locked under braking here, he's going to have a very good run as a number of drivers go wide through turn 3 and have to take to the escape route there. There's going to be some penalties dished out, I suspect, as Yaya has broken into the lead out of turns 2 and 3. And Chronic Opel finds himself pushed a little bit wide into 4, but he makes the return into 5 and he's trying to hold on to that P5 or higher right now. This is going to be critical for Chronic because they come into Tetra Rouge for the first time of asking then. Let's just see if all of our drivers make it through. And Careless 1 getting it very wrong going through Tetra Rouge and going wide there. And we're not sure there was contact, and it looks as though Eclipse has had a disastrous start. It means that now everything is going to open up. And in fact, is that Chronic Opel taking a penalty? It is Chronic Opel taking a penalty. He picked up a half-second penalty. I think that must have been for Tetra Rouge. Something has gone wrong there. And now Olaf Biscuit and Yaya battling down into the first of the Mulsanne chicanes here, and Olaf holding back onto the lead at this point. But remember what we said earlier, folks, just because you've got the place going into one chicane does not mean that you're going to be holding on to it by the end of the second chicane. And this is the difficult part, and you can see all of our drivers forming into one long slipstream train here, and the only driver who's not really in that train right now is the Netherlands' Eclipse, where he'll be wanting to catch up as they come into the braking zones and there's battling side by side. And speaking of side by side, we can see that Yaya is having to be in 2 minds to defend against him, but also chased after Olaf. And these 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 drivers are all probably thinking to one another, nobody make any silly moves right now. But in terms of moves coming up, we can see that Dylan is looking to make a move on him, and potentially as they're coming up then towards the kink into the Mulsanne corner, who will be leading as we come out of this corner onto the Gulf Straight. And you can see they're going to go side by side. Dylan going to the outside initially, but backing off of it, just simply tucking in behind. And I think what Dylan's thinking to himself right now is put some pressure on, yes, but don't go for any silly moves here. You can't afford them. As we can see, hold on a second, what has happened to Eclipse? It's all gone horrifically wrong for the British driver, and he's just got it wrong on exit of the second Mulsanne chicane and has planted it into the wall by the looks of things. That's a disaster. But up front, meanwhile, we can see that Olaf once again feeling that pressure on the Gulf Straight this time, and he's going to be side by side with Yaya, who's got the run, but he's on the outside for Indianapolis. But you can see Olaf backed out of it, and Iman has gone to the inside for Indianapolis, and Dylan is trying to take it around the outside, but he's had to back out of it as well, and backed out so much that now we have Spelgazen up into 4th, and behind them Kreinikopa as Garrett has picked up a half-second penalty, and I think that will be for a sizable cut of the run into Indianapolis there. So Garrett has lost out a bit in terms of time, will fall into the clutches of KS1 as he now takes his penalty. But in the battle for the lead right now, we have got 6 drivers in the fight for P1, and we can see they're going 3 wide as they come into the Porsche curves then, and it will be Yaya who dictates the lead group as Olaf takes into 2nd place. Iman backs out of it, but Spalgazen is now closing up on them, and meanwhile Dylan Cliff and Kreinikopa are both hanging in there. And this is such the critical thing in the fact that as soon as these guys fight up front, everybody behind will gain about a second just through the fighting. As we can see, Iman almost runs off and wide there, but just about holds on through the Corvette curves, and now into the Ford chicanes. Are there going to be any moves? I suspect not. As they come into these chicanes, they're going to simply try and pass through without incident. So after 1 lap, ladies and gentlemen, leading the field away is Yaya, followed by Olaf Biscuit, and then Iman, and then Spalgazen. And you've got Dylan Cliff and Kreinikopa chasing after them, although Dylan is going for a move already on Spalgazen into 1, but Spalgazen will of course have that inside line into 2, and I think Dylan has fought second of it as he doesn't go for the cutback here, but simply tucks in behind. In 7th right now is Garrett, with KLS1 behind him in 8th, and then Eclipse in 9th and MDC in 10th. But it's all kicking off up front still, as we can see that whilst Yaya is pulling away a little bit right now, it's not a huge gap, and behind them, these guys, as we see, Kreinikopa has picked up another half-second penalty, and that will be for cutting turn number 3. That's a disaster for the Australian, because this will put him so far back as they now come onto the Mulsanne straight for the second time of asking, and he will have needed to be in that slipstream zone because he's got so much work now to do just relying on the Mazda straight line speed. He can do it, of course, but he's going to fall so far back in this contest that now he will not be within striking distance for at least another lap. But meanwhile, all the way up in the lead has changed once again. It's in the hands of Olaf Biscuit right now, and behind them you can see that Iman and Spalgazen are battling, and Spalgazen has jumped up into P3 by overtaking Iman, and Dylan has fallen back to P5, but they're just constantly trading places, and that's why this is going to be so unpredictable. And look at Kreinikopa, he's still 2 seconds behind Dylan. He's getting a very distant tow, but remember, Dylan will be getting a 4-way tow off of the 4 guys in front of him, so Kreinik has got to do all the legwork on his engine, as up front we can see that there's been another battle for the lead, and again, coming into the second of the chicanes. Hold on a second, I think we've seen someone go very wide there into the second Mulsanne chicane, and that is Dylan Cliff, who's got it all sorts of wrong, and that's a disaster for the Irishman. We will see what happened very shortly, folks, as he's trying to get that car back under control, but 1 has fallen and 5 remain in this chase for the race win. As we can see that Dylan has dropped about 3 seconds behind Kreinikopa, and Yaya looking to make the move into the Mulsanne corner here, although he's doing it quite close under braking, as we hear an announcement that Valev has just joined into the paddock, so he might be joining us for race number 2, and we can see that there has been a 1-second penalty for Spalgazen for cutting the corner at Mulsanne, and that means that he will be dropping down to P4 and into the clutches of his teammate. Now he's got to be wary of the fact his teammate's right behind him, and he won't want to impede the fast running Mazda there. Those two will need to work together, and immediately they are going back to teamwork, and that is great teamwork by the two drivers. Of course, team orders are not permitted, but you can see how Spalgazan immediately reacted to his teammate being there, as they're all coming out of Indianapolis then, and they're all settling down a little bit, and we can see there is a battle going on right now between De Gueret and Dylan Cliff in P6, of which Gueret is now up into 6, but looking back then, let's see what happened to Dylan Cliff. So he was coming down in towards the second Mulsanne chicane then, and well, was it just a mistake on the braking? Did he carry too much speed into the corner and take emergency action to the outside? Well, he's carrying a lot more speed. He's going to be up to about 216 at braking here, hitting that rev limiter, and he's just got it wrong, and he's had to take emergency action. He carried too much speed, and that was a good evasion by Dylan there, because otherwise that could have been an absolute disaster. As we can see, he has got back past Gueret. Now, where did that happen? I think it's probably happened out of our Narge. Yeah, it's already happened in our Narge, so we missed that in terms of on the live camera, but Dylan back up into P6, and up front meanwhile it's Olaf Biscuit back up in front of Yaya. These guys constantly trading, and Chronic Opal has caught up, but Spalgazan has started to fall back, and you can see that gap is 1.8 seconds at the moment, so Spalgazan will not be able to catch up immediately, but he will have that distant toe off of his teammate, and he'll be hoping that Chronic can pull him back into that fight. Meanwhile, speaking about fighting behind, you can see that Gueret did not have the best of runs out of the final corner there, out of the 4 chicanes, and that means he is being caught by KLS1, so these guys will be sizing one another. Whereas Eclipse and MDC are running P9 and P10 respectively, and not close to one another out on circuit. So again, much like on the previous lap, we have one driver leading our battle for the lead around the circuit and pulling a little bit of a gap, but you can see it's closing up already. This time it's Olaf Biscuit leading around on lap number 3, and Yaya right up his rear end and charging after him. Now, did Chronic Opal nail Tetra Rouge this time and not pick up a penalty? He did. And this will be important, because what it means this time, with him being 1.7 seconds off of our race leader, he can gain the triple toe down the straight. His teammate picked up a half-second penalty at Tetra Rouge by looks things, or a 1 second penalty. So it's a 4-way fight for the lead, and coming down into the first of the chicanes then, it's going to be Yaya on the inside initially to go to the outside, and Olaf defends well, and Yaya tries to go for the cutback, but he does not pull it off there. So all 4 drivers will close up here, particularly Chronic, who's going to close up alongside Immelman, as Yaya and also Olaf have been battling so hard, and behind them, of course, we can see that the gaps are open up. Gueret has picked up an additional penalty, and that means KLS1 will gain the run, but focusing back up on front, going to the second chicane, it's going to be 3 wide under braking. Olaf losing 2 places in the braking zone this time, but of course Olaf will know this, he will have planned for this, as Chronic is all over the rear of these guys now, and it's going to be a 4-way battle up into the Mulsanne corner, and this is where they'll want to gain that positional advantage, because then it's only the Gulf Straight, and Indianapolis is much harder to overtake into, so as they all charge down towards the Mulsanne corner, then it's side by side between Yaya and Iman at this point, and it looks as though in fact Olaf has dropped back a little bit. He's taken an outside line with Chronic Opal on his inside, but Chronic backs out of it, because I think what he's realised is he would have taken to cut the curve there of Mulsanne if he was going to go for the move, and he's backed out of it so much I don't think he's going to have a run here, and perhaps he's hoping there's going to be a lot of battling from the guys up in front. But you can see how Spalgazan has also caught up. He's going to be in the rear of your picture very shortly as they come round into the final kink of the Gulf, and it's 3 wide coming down into Indianapolis. Then who is going to have that advantage as they come down into an Indianapolis braking zone? Olaf tried turning in very early, and he had to back out of it, and it's Iman who is now leading our quadrant of drivers here, our quadruple set of drivers. They're all coming down into our Narge here. Is anybody going to go for a late move? It doesn't look like it, and it's Iman who's going to lead. Now Iman has only got 2 sectors to go, and he's in the commanding position here because he's got 8 tenths up on the guys behind him. Spalgazan gets it a little wrong coming out of our Narge, but any one of these 4 could technically pick up the win or be on the podium, and you can see behind you've got Yaya who's having to defend to the inside of the opening part of the Porsche curves against Olaf Biscuit. A little bit of contact there which forced Olaf a little bit wide, and he wasn't anticipating that, and that drops him further back into the clutches of the Australian Chronic Opal, and that Mazda will be roaring after him, but now it's a corner orientated sector, so unless he can nail coming through the Corvette curves here, and all 4 of them do, but you can see Chronic is trying to go for a move, and Iman is past Yaya. He's got past Yaya coming out of the Corvette curves, and that's just the chicanes. Will Iman be able to hold on for the race win? As you can see, he's going very slowly. He's tiptoeing through the final chicane, and at the end of the race it will be Iman who leads and wins from Yaya, and Olaf Biscuit drops to P4 through picking up a penalty from the final chicane, which means our 3rd place man will be Chronic Opal. In 5th it's Spalgazan, in 6th it's Dylan Cliff, who couldn't recover in time. KLS1 comes home in P7 ahead of De Gueret. Gueret's just coming to the end of the lap right now. And well, I think he's covering this final chicane, and there's a sizable gap back to P9 and P10, but congratulations to all of our drivers so far. And then it's Eclipse coming home in P9, and then last but not least of our running drivers will be MDC as he comes through the forward chicanes then, and he completes our running order after race number 1. But what a very, very close end, and it all being decided on the podium there by a penalty. But your race winner, ladies and gentlemen. But what a cracking end to race number 1, and it could have been any one of those 4 who won the race. But here's your final confirmed standings, subject to any stewards' investigations that are requested, of course. Race winner, Iman, one of our only 2 race winners in EU Division 1 this season. Iman now on 3 race wins, only 1 off of Olaf Biscuit's total of 4. A very good run by there. Second place went to Yaya. Chronocope with third, inheriting third place with Olaf Biscuit, picking up that 1 second penalty by cutting too much, it would seem, of the final forward chicane. And then in 5th place, our top 5 being rounded out by Spalgazan. And major points for Chronocope and Spalgazan in their aspirations together in the Constructors' Championship. The fastest lap in that race went to Chronocope on lap number 2 with a 3:19.9. Well, that's race number 1, folks, and well, we've still got 2 more to go. But if that is going to set the standard of our next 2 races, you can imagine it's going to be close. And I definitely think we could be due for a new race winner in races 2 or 3, because we've had, if it weren't for the mistakes made by Dylan and Spalgazan respectively, we could have potentially seen a 6-way fight for the race win right at the end there. But of course, 6 went into it, 2 fell, 4 remained, and in the end, it was Iman who came out on top. But all of our drivers having to play it strategically there, and that's the one key takeaway to take away from what you witnessed there. And I would personally take away is that all of our drivers contesting for that top 5 were all having to try and think strategically down the Mulsanne straight of who positions where for which part and where do you attack. And you could see that, well, the driver who seemed to lose out a little bit too much there was Yaya, because he initially had that run into the Mulsanne. He seemed to have so much momentum, but then he would lose it coming into the end of the Mulsanne on that Gulf straight, and just found himself at the wrong position at the wrong time, and in the right position at the wrong time as well. But again, he'll use that experience from race number 1, and he'll take it into races 2 and 3, I'm sure, because it's a learning experience. You've got to learn as you go through each of these races what worked in race 1, what didn't work, change your strategy, etc. And we're just going to say hello to some other drivers who have, sorry, not driver, well, some drivers who are racing in this, who are in the chat. You should be focusing on racing, gents. But also welcome to Colm D, and we've also got Gomez and Freeme, or Freeme, and Yaya, who's one of our racers, who should be more concentrated on the race. But I'm only joking, Yaya. Good to see you all in here, and I hope you're all having a good start to your weeks. Oh, goodness me. But remember what we said about Chronocope. We saw that Mazda's performance on the straights there, and he didn't lose out too much in the corners. And really, that goes to show that whilst Olaf was able to pull off a phenomenal qualifying lap, that qualifying pace does not dictate an advantage in the race, not by a huge margin. And we're really waiting for the confirmation of race number 2 to get underway. Of course, we have had confirmation that Valive will be joining us, and he is coming out in the 962C. So another Porsche driver here, but that's great news. Sorry, Valive, I should say, not Valive. But Valive joining in means that De Grid has also got his teammate running out on circuit, so these guys can look to get some major points potentially to make their way up the standings in the Constructors' Championship, and also their own personal aspirations in the Drivers' Championship. Now, Valive, at the moment, as I say, sitting in P14, having only got 1 point to his name after race 1 in round number 1, and he has not participated in any of the races so far. Unfortunately, 2 retirements in round number 1, in races 2 and 3, and then he just wasn't able to take part in in round number 2. So we're just waiting for that confirmation that we're going to have the next race underway any moment, anytime soon. As we do see that we do appear to have a bit of a pit glitch going on at the moment, with Dylan Cliff having a bit of a fun moment in the pits. In fact, all of our drivers seemingly having a bit of a pit glitch issue. And we're just going to let our host know that we have got a pit glitch issue. I think what might be going in the minds of some of our drivers as well, and I think particularly for, say, Chronic, and also for Yaya, the guys who I think really do want one race win to their name over the course of tonight, is they may be thinking right now, you know what, I got too heavily involved in the fighting down the Mulsanne Straight and the Gulf Straight, particularly on lap 2, in Yaya's case, getting too heavily involved, and perhaps we'll want to back out of it a little bit. As we can see, the lobby has been crashed and a new lobby will be reformed. So we are going to have a slight delay to our proceedings tonight. And we say hello to El Neil. Hope you're doing well, good sir. In the meantime, not too much is going to be happening whilst we're waiting for things to get underway. I think the lobby will be reformed any moment now. Well, we appear to have some sort of practice lobby set up. We're just waiting for confirmation that everybody can rejoin. I think everyone's going to pile into this lobby, so we're going to hop in there as well. Lovely. Yeah, everyone's just going to rejoin. I believe we've had some technical issues for some of our drivers who are having to restart equipment at the moment. And it happens in sim racing nights. You do have those technical issues every so often come up. And because we do have the need to reform the lobby, it means that we do get that grace period of an extended break between races 1 and 2. Which means some of our drivers here will probably use that to take a quick toilet break. Probably being cheeky to our host right now, saying, oh no, I've got some sudden technical issues, but actually not, I need to quickly hop to the bathroom. We just had a room name change as well, so everybody is still getting back into things. And we really do need to introduce Valive, and really, he's the biggest question mark factor here, or the black sheep in the room, in the fact that we haven't seen him race in round 2, and we only saw him briefly race in round number 1. Now, we know from personal experience and from what we've seen previously that he's a very fast driver. When the combination suits him and he's on his A game, he can be a very, very fast driver. And he will got into EU Division 1, of course, on merit in terms of time trial pace. So this could be another potential contender here for the top 5 positions. You never know what's possible, and we will find out as we come into race number 2. But of course, for the time being, he, along with a number of drivers, will be getting in some more practice laps here. They'll be using as much time as possible to practice, simply because when there's time available, you want to get a lap in or two. As you can see, he's got a very wrong at Indianapolis there and waiting to rejoin the circuit, as we've got Careless 1 coming through the corner. And in fact, you can see that the lathe has reset to the pits. Apologies for this, folks, though. It will take a little bit longer than usual. We were hoping to get underway about 5 minutes ago, but still, things happen and we just got to wait. And we have got Eclipse back in, so I think with that, that means we will have all 11 drivers ready to go. Eclipse is the only one. I'm wondering whether we will be getting in a quick stuck check as well, because of the fact we've reformed the lobby, which is not uncommon. So there might be a further 5 minutes or so delay to getting things underway. KLS1 here, just giving us a quick tour around the circuit. You can see how much you can cut of the opening part of the Dunlop chicane, but as soon as you cut too much of either part, you just simply pick up that half-second penalty, and it's a crippling penalty because you have to serve it at the start of the Mulsanne straight, which costs you so much time by comparison with what's available to you out on circuit. By that straight line speed, you lose 5-10 miles an hour of your straight line speed down onto the Mulsanne straight, and it's a curtain call. You lose so many places in that run. And of course, fortunately for us, in terms of serving penalties here, we do not have the enforced penalty serving system of the FIA races in GT Sport, whereby the game will tell you within a penalty zone, it will automatically apply a brake and start to drop the speed of the car. Instead, here our drivers can just simply lift off the throttle and burn the penalty. Means they lose a little bit less speed by comparison with the FIA system, which completely takes the speed out of the car. And to give you an idea, the first penalty burning zone in an FIA race would be after the opening chicane of the Mulsanne straight, so it's coming up what would effectively be about right now where those orange marshals are standing, and the car, if it's a 1 second penalty, you could be at 170 miles an hour going into the penalty zone. You'll come out of it at approximately 130. So then you've got to regain 40 miles an hour, which is a huge change because a 1 second penalty is the equivalent of about a 2.5 to 3 second penalty down the straight. Alrighty folks, well I've just had confirmation we are going straight into race number 2, so we are getting underway. So belt and brace is ready, and let's see what happens in race number 2. Of course, we've got a different leader off the line this time, and that will be your man. So as you hear them all revving their engines away then. On the right of your picture in P1 it's Arkiman. In the left of your picture it is Yaya. Behind them Krynik Opel and Olaf Biscuit. And then keep an eye on Spalgazan and Dylan Cliff. And the unknown factor right at the back, Valave 19. Who will win race number 2? We'll find out after 3 more laps of intense action. And it's lights out and away they go, and you can immediately see Iman then trying to rotate the car in on launch. But the one who's got the brilliant launch, much like in race 1, is Krynik Opel. And as he comes through the first corner then, as Eclipse is pushed out onto the gravel, it would seem, it would appear that Krynik Opel has had an absolutely phenomenal start. Although unfortunately we do seem to have a car that's stuck, and I'm not sure whether this race is going to be aborted because of a car being stuck. We're going to find out shortly, but Krynik Opel has had a phenomenal opener, and Iman, Yaya and Spalgazan chasing after him right now. And it looks as though we are going to continue with the race. As we can see in the rear of your picture, Yaya has lost out massive. No, it looks though we are aborting the race and we are going to be doing another one. That is very unfortunate. So the race has been cancelled. I think a couple of our drivers there, particularly Chronicopal, will be raging at that because they will have felt that they had a very good start and they were able to pull away. So we're going to see what happens. That is very unfortunate that Dylan Cliff was stuck on the line there. And now we appear to have a pit glitch coming out of the pit. So things are going from bad to worse in terms of lobby. And we have got drivers leaving the room left, right and centre. So unfortunately, folks, that will be considered a practice start. And I think we're going to have to wait a sizable amount of time now before we get underway once again. And there probably will have to be start checks as well, because we are seeing multiple pit bug glitches. But we'll wait and see, and we'll let you know as soon as anything happens here. And welcome to Elliot Suggest. I believe that's how we pronounce your name. And I hope you're doing well. So I think we are going to see our drivers pour back into the lobby. Again, it will be a bit of a delay here. I'm just waiting for confirmation of what will be happening. But one thing's for certain, we can see that Chronicopal, if he is given the space on that launch in third place, he is going to be jumping his way up the field very rapidly. That Mazda, in terms of acceleration from start, appears to be phenomenal, at least in the hands of the Australian. I think he will now have a point to prove in terms of getting into the lead come the start. And remember, with his straight line speed advantage, which won't offset completely the slipstream, but it will give him an advantage on the Mulsanne straights. I think if he can find himself in P1 and he can pull out, say, an 8 tenths to 1 second gap going onto the Mulsanne straight, he will be very hard to catch up to, and other drivers will literally have to work themselves into overdrive to catch up. And it will be in the second half of the lap where they'll potentially catch up, because we know the Porsche is the better handling car through the medium to high speed curves, particularly the Porsche curves and also the Corvette curves. But it will be in Kreinik's fate, and it will be in his hands in order to hold on to that race win. And that will be on the head of a number of drivers. That will be on the minds of a number of our drivers now, particularly our two front starters, so Iman and also Yaya, because they'll be thinking they need to do something to stem the potency of that Mazda 787. So we're going to be doing a start check, ladies and gentlemen, before we get underway with race number 2, because we have had multiple people crash as of the previous race start. So this is not race 2 starting. We are going to be doing a start check first. And hello to Aiden is very slow. Alrighty folks, so this will be a start check, and well, of course we won't have all of our drivers within the appropriate starting order here. Again, let's ride on board with Kreinik and get a feel for his starting procedure. So let's just see how quickly this car launches off the grid. You can definitely see it is in that starting procedure. The car is just so strong off the line. Well, for Kreinik then, he knows what he needs to do. He just needs to nail that start and then make sure that the opening chicane, nothing goes wrong. That's within his control, of course. Because if he can nail it, he'll be running away with it. So they're going to get the grid order set properly, and then we'll be underway with race number 2. So all of our drivers will now start making their way out onto the racetrack. Of course, some of them will be practicing their race starts, such as KLS1 here. You can see that he's doing a practice race start. I think he perhaps feels that he needs to work on his starts, the Dutchman, in order to improve his race results. Because we know he's got a good amount of underlying pace, KLS, but he just simply needs to get the start nailed down and iron out some of those mistakes that he saw in race 1, particularly the potential penalties. Everyone's now running out onto the field, and we're just getting the grid order set, and we will be good to go for race 2. Hopefully this time things do not go sideways and instead stay together. KLS1 doing another practice start. Alrighty, race number 2 will be coming at you, ladies and gentlemen, as we've just had the announcement we are getting underway. Alrighty then, folks, so without further ado, the countdown commences. It's going to be 5 red lights before the green lights, and then let's see what happens. So once again then, on the right hand side of your picture, it will be Arkirman starting in P1. On the left hand side, Yaya. Behind them, Krynik Opel in the beastly 787 on that start, and alongside him, Olaf Biscuit. Watch out for Spal Gazan and Dylan Cliff behind, and of course, the Live starting at the back. What can he do, having just joined? And it's lights out and away they go. And will it be a repeat of the original start for race number 2? And immediately you could see how Yaya and also Iman tried to close Krynik off and squeeze him to prevent him from getting through. But he's been able to put the car in position, and he's gone for the charge up into the opening chicane. Bit of contact there. Everybody's concertinaed into one another, but everybody's kept it relatively clean. I think all 11 drivers have made it through the opening chicane without penalty. Spal Gazan most notably up into P3. Spal Gazan has had a very good opening run as they go through the end of sector 1 then, and as they come on to Tetra Rouge, we can see side by side coming up into the corner, backing out. It was De Great who was trying to get down alongside Dylan Cliff. Olaf Biscuit's also fallen back, and some half-second penalties being dished out. De Great picking one up, and already up front, look at the gap that has opened up. It's closing down because of slipstream right now, but remember what I said about the Mazda 787 straight line speed. It's given them an advantage, and as they all charge down towards the first chicane along the Mulsanne then, it is going to be a lot of side-by-side movement, but Krynik Opel going deep on the brakes there into the opening chicane, carrying a bit too much momentum, and Yaya's been backed up as a result of it. And Spal Gazan now, as we ride on board with a British driver here, you can see that he's chasing after Yaya, but he's got a lot of pressure behind him from Iman, and I think he'll have one eye on his rear view mirror as we switch back to external cameras here, and they're all charging along, and then coming up into the second chicane, it's going to be 3 wide under braking, and Spal Gazan potentially looking for the move for the lead here. I think this might be a bit premature in terms of aspirations, and he's got to be so careful because he's battling with his teammate, and that battling has cost Krynik Opel the lead out of that chicane, and Spal Gazan finds himself dropping all the way down to P5 as there's contact further down. Now what on earth has happened there as we see somebody's into the wall, and it's KLS1. Let's take a look back and find out what happened there coming down to the second chicane. So he was in P9 with the Live cut behind it, and the Live looked as though, hold on a second, The light seems to just clip through his car and side by side through the chicane here, and it's just not working out. And Careless One now came through the corner, and there was contact. So MDC and Olaf Biscuit also had an incident, and it all just simply went wrong for Careless One, not through his own fault, unfortunately. But now as they come down then Gulf Straight towards the Indianapolis corner, what you can see in the rear of your picture, we've got a five-way battle for the lead as we expected last time out, and it's going to be 3 wide behind Yaya here as Krynik, Dylan and Iman all fighting, and Spalgazner is trying to get back in the mix. And I think Krynik has had to take an emergency break in there to get through the corner, and behind them De Great has picked up a penalty for cutting the curb into Indianapolis. But behind those guys, Olaf Biscuit has lost out the most there, all the way down in P9 after the opening half of the lap. And Olaf right now finding himself on a recovery charge as he's got to make his way all the way up the order with all 11 cars still running, but he's got so much to do. And meanwhile, we've got 4 wide and 3 wide now coming up into the Porsche curve, and Dylan Cliff, having started all the way down in what was the 3rd row, is now up into P2 and charging. But this is giving Yaya the opportunity to break away, and Spalgazner just about catches it going into the Corvette curves. They're just staying within track limits, but I think the British driver there is struggling, and he's picked up a half-second penalty, and he's going to even have that compounded as he goes wide out the final Corvette curve, and that means he's going to have at least a 1-second penalty, and he's dropping it already. But this is giving Spalgazner an absolute headache, and it means that De Great now is right up his rear. So after 1 lap, it is Yaya with a half-second penalty after cutting the 4 chicanes, followed by Dylan Cliff, followed by Iman, followed by Krynik Opel, followed by Spalgazner, then De Great, then MDC battling with Olaf Biscuit as they come up into turn 1, up into Dunlop chicane for the 2nd time of asking. And I think Olaf is going to try and hang it round the outside of turn 2 into 3, which will give him the inside line of 3, of course, and he's gotten the move done. So MDC, as he cuts turn 2, and I think MDC is going to be going wide there as he gets it all sorts of wrong. Valev, meanwhile, coming up into P9 and past MDC for P8, and behind them you've got Eclipse, who's able to get past MDC as he rejoins and gets back up in running order, and then Careless One in P11. But up front, it is Yaya who is pulling away just a little bit. It's not a huge gap, and I suspect that the guys up front are all going to close up, because the gap from P7 all the way down to P1 is only 5.2 seconds, so all 7 drivers here are theoretically in with a chance of getting the race win here, or at least being on that podium. And I think for Olaf Biscuit right now, he's the one who's got to go on the charge here. He's got to work it so hard to close up, and you can see already under braking here. I think Goretz just got it simply wrong going through the first of the chicanes, and now has to get a recovery in as he needs to settle that car down. And Olaf Biscuit is going to say, thank you very much, sir, we'll have our drag race here, but I'm in the slipstream, you may as well just tuck in behind me. But ahead of them, meanwhile, there's not too much changing up front, and I think really Olaf and De Great are just simply going to be the closest guys in that pack, but not fighting one another right now. Behind them, of course, Valev kind of running in P9 ahead of Eclipse. MDC has got back ahead of him, and well, we can see that whilst it's all packing up front and it's getting closer and closer in terms of the pack, you do have to wonder, what can Olaf Biscuit do right now, because he's dropped so far back? Can he make that recovery and get all the way back onto the podium? And speaking of the battle for the podium, we've got a change for the race lead, and that is Dylan Cliff, who's going to go around the outside potentially into the Mulsanne corner, but Yaya taking a defensive position and running Dylan incredibly wide there. And in the back of your picture, you can see Spalgazner getting it all sorts of wide, but what it means is now we have got a 4-way fight on once again as they go down the Gulf Straight. Yaya being the leader as Dylan Cliff is dropping into a battle against Krynik Opel, and surely he will need to cede this, as we can see that Spalgazner picked up a half-second penalty for track limits at the Mulsanne corner, and Dylan right now is going to fight back potentially as Yaya and Iman are going side by side into Indianapolis, and only one of them is going to get through here, and it will be Iman who regains the lead position for the time being as he backs out of it, Yaya, and he thinks, right, save it for another lap. And Spalgazner has dropped down to P6 as De Great is holding on to P7 and trying to get in the mix for a top 5 position. But again, now coming in the run down towards the Porsche curves, you can see our top 4 all going side by side. It's like Noah's Ark, 2 by 2, hurrah, hurrah, as they're all charging up here. They won't settle into a line. They all want to be the lead driver going into the Porsche curves. Although it's lap number 2, they all think that positional advantage is critical here as Iman goes wide, and Yaya has to concede because Iman comes back on the line and he hasn't got as much control of the car, and Yaya did a good move there to block that as Dylan Cliff goes wide. Now I'm not sure if there was contact there or whether Dylan's got it wrong. But Dylan will now drop back massively into the clutches of the battle for P5, and you can see he's picked up a half-second penalty for his transgression of the track limits, and he's now down to P5. He's going to have to burn that penalty, and that means he's right now going to be at the back of this train as he comes through the Ford chicanes. And as we go on to the final lap, ladies and gentlemen, whilst Dylan right now is going to be holding on to P6, he will be P7 as he crosses the line, and it means we have got a, well, hold on a second, what's happening in the rear of your picture? I think Great's got all sorts of wrong because of the incident with Dylan there. And it means we have definitely got a five-way fight for the race win here between Yaya, Iman, Chronicopel, Olaf Biscuit and Spalgazan, and you love to see it as Spalgazan gets it wrong coming out of the Dunlop chicane and almost loses it, but just about catches it. Well caught, that man, but that means he is now out of the slipstream zone for the battle for the lead. So that means we've only got 4 drivers in contention right now, and our lead driver in this pack, and he's doing everything right, is Yaya. He will want this win so badly to make it that there's been 3 different race winners, but remember, he's got the whole of the Mulsanne straight to go, and if there's been such a long straight with such massive acceleration zones, the 3 guys behind him, most so Chronicopel and P3, will be gaining on him every metre of the way, with the toe being so great, and Chronic will be trying to put so much pressure on as they come to the end of the straight and trying to size it up. Meanwhile in P5 is Dylan Cliff, and he has got past Spalgazan, who had to take his penalty, and great, and I think for Dylan right now it's all about damage limitation, and he will want this P5. Further down we've got MDC, Eclipse, Valev and Callus 1 all separate from one another, but up front we can see Yaya and Iman going side by side up into the second chicane, albeit there's still a long run to that braking zone, and Iman has got the lead initially, but will Yaya come back? As we can see, Chronicopel is getting into that mix as well, and Olav in the P4 right now just simply holding back, and I think Olav is thinking here, you know what, I might be able to gain 1 or 2 places, or just simply go for it right towards the end. But as all 4 of these guys now come down towards the run into the Mulsanne corner, then who will it be leading them onto the Golf straight? And I think Yaya is thinking about a move here. As you can see, Chronicopel is going to the outside as they come into the corner, and Yaya goes very late on the brakes here. He parks it up and he sends Iman off with him almost, and in fact Iman has gone off, and I think there might have been some contact there, and what it means is now Chronicopel is up into P2, but the guy who got the best run out of that whole sequence was initially Olaf. But remember, the Mazda of Chronic now is opening its legs massively, and it's a drag race down towards Indianapolis, and Chronic will have the inside initially, but Olaf is not going to give this up. Now who's going to emerge the winner of that little battle as they come into the final set of corners then? I think it's going to be Olaf as he goes around the outside, looks to the inside into Indianapolis but doesn't have it, and it means that Chronic is pushed wide initially, but he has got the inside, but he's going to have to back out of it into Arnage, and now Yaya is up into P1, but the pressure's building, and Iman and Olaf have taken one another off, and what on earth has happened there as Dylan Cliff spins out coming out of Arnage? He had to take emergency action, and Gray almost loses the car as well, and that means your race leader now by a second and running away as much as he can is Yaya's. Chronicopel was chasing after him. We are going to see a different race winner in race number 2, and it's so close, and the scream of that Mazda is not going to let Yaya go. He's going like hell right now, Chronic. Meanwhile, further back, Olaf let's get up into P3, and I think from Olaf's perspective right now, he'll be happy that he's in P3, as Great is down into P6, and Cliff has lost out so much. But coming into the final set of chicanes then, it's going to be Yaya who's coming into the final Ford chicane, and I think he's done it. He's done it, ladies and gentlemen. Yaya wins ahead of Chronicopel, and behind them it's going to be Olaf Biscuit coming home in P3 after what a splendid recovery job. Arkiman in P4, Spalgazan in P5, it's going to be Great in P6 who's gained significantly for everything. MDC and Dylan drag racing to the line, MDC holding on for P7, Dylan P8, Eclipse P9, and it's going to be Valev and Callus 1, P10 and P11. But quickly, can we see what happened back there in terms of that incident? And I think just as they came down to the corner then, we're going to see what happened here on the replay camera. And we're going to ride on board, in fact, and there was contact, so that's why Olaf Biscuit got knocked by him, man, and that's what happened there. But that is the race over, ladies and gentlemen. There's your final classifications, and your race winner, Yaya 777. What a crazy end to race number 2. I can't believe it, and I'm sure you folks can't. That was insane. But yep, there as it stands, obviously subject to any stewards discussions. I think there's going to be some discussions, not necessarily about Yaya. I'm not incriminating anyone here, folks. But there was a lot of madness on lap number 1. But Yaya, our race winner, after what was a frantic 3 laps, followed by Kreinikoper. And Kreinik will be thinking to himself, now that he's on that front row, he doesn't have that risk of being squeezed on the start procedure. And in P3 was Olaf Biscuit. Iman in P4 after having to let Biscuit recover after that disaster in Tarnage. And Spalgazem wrapping up that top 5. And I think there might be some words between Kreinik and Spalgazem, because Kreinik may feel that Spalgazem really compromised his chances of just running away with it, particularly on lap 1 with the whole incident into the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. Great coming home in P6 for his season matching best, I believe. And MDC picking up a P7. He'll be very happy with that. And Dylan Cliff having a disastrous end there with that P8 after such a good run, bringing him up into the top 5. Fastest lap there, a 3:19.8 as set by Olaf Biscuit on lap number 2. But what a crazy race too. There's definitely right now amongst the paddock, there is a lot of conversation going on about incidents that happened across the laps, which is why I say it's subject to any stewards' investigations, the final race results, of course. But, well, you couldn't ask for more than that. There was a lot of elbows there. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. As we now switch our conditions to 9 o'clock in the evening. It's amazing how quickly time moves in France. But it's 9 o'clock in the evening, the sun's still out, and we now move on to race number 3, which is going to be the endurance race. Now, this is going to be the big one, of course, because it's worth 50% more points. But we've also got that strategy element thrown into the mix, which is that our drivers must make a pit stop at some point in the race. But of course, with that pit stop, there is the choice. Do you take on fresh tyres, or do you decide to run with 3-lap old tyres and take them into the race? Now, of course, it's a 6-lapper, this one. And what we've seen is after 3 laps, the tyres start to show overall wear. But the lap times are still coming in. I suspect it will only really be on the last 2 laps that our drivers are going to feel that tyre wear, particularly through Tetra Rouge and also through the curbs. So the final half of the circuit after Indianapolis, our drivers are going to feel it. So it'll be a gamble. And the pit loss time here, if I remember correctly, ladies and gentlemen, for a tyre change is actually quite sizable. I think it's somewhere in the region of 12 to 13 seconds for a tyre change, and it'll be about 8 seconds for not changing tyres. But don't quote me on that. I know the pit stop time at Le Saf is a long one by comparison with other circuits we've run this season and over the course of this year in multiple seasons. So it's going to be one of those where I think our drivers are going to be having to do a lot of thinking in terms of what they do on the strategy front. But we'll wait and see. We've still got 6 laps to go, and race 3 is about to get underway. Here we go then, ladies and gentlemen. 1 more to go. Who is going to come out on top by the end of it? It's going to be anyone's guess, but I'm putting my money on Kreinikofer leading us into the first half of this one. So without further ado then, on the right-hand side of your picture, it is Yaya. On the left-hand side, Kreinikofer. Behind them, Olaf Biscuit and Iman. And behind them, Spalgazem and Dergaret. But watch out for Dylan Cliff in P8, who'll be looking to make up a huge amount of ground on the opening couple of laps. So as we have our distant camera shot, of course. And we've got one driver who's jumped the start immediately, and we can see that that was Biscuit, by the looks of things, he jumped the start and he will be dropping all the way down. But Kreinikople has had a great start, as would be expected from the Mazda. We've seen it time and time again. And as they all come up into turn 2, then it's going to be Spalgazan planting himself on the inside of 2, but the outside of 3, side by side with Garrett, as they battle their way through the Dunlop chicane. And I think Spalgazan has done enough to get himself into P3, and Iman has popped up into P4. Might have been a little bit of a mistake on the power there from Garrett coming out of 3. And as they charge through into Tetra Rouge, then you can see that Eclipse is up into P7, KLS1 up into P8. And now as they all come through the most demanding corner in terms of making sure you don't get a penalty, we can see that Yaya has picked up a penalty, and that's a disaster for him. And as Garrett goes to look for a move on Iman for P3, Yaya is now building up his speed. It's going to be 4 wide, charging down the straight, and Yaya is just being kicked around like a football there in terms of being in between all the cars and having that speed disadvantage as he drops all those places. And under braking into the first of the chicanes on Mulsanne, you can see Garrett has got it horrifically wrong and has to take emergency action into the gravel, dropping him all the way down the order there, and Iman emerges in P2. But look at the gap already. Our Mazda driver has broken open to the rest of the field. 1.5 seconds between Kreinikople and Iman, and of course that will close down because of the weak slipstream distance here, but the return will be that straight line speed will give a huge advantage going onto the straights, and it should give him the momentum. And Olav already returning back into P7 after everything that has happened. Now there's no change up front coming into the second of the chicanes then, but they are getting closer and closer, all of our drivers. Eclipse up into P8, De Great rejoins in P9, MDC in P10, and Valive all the way down in P11. A disaster for Lev, but in return you can see that as they're all starting to get closer and closer to Kranich with all the slipstream effect in play, all of our drivers seemingly settling down a little bit more here and not being as close as perhaps they would like to be. And I'm not sure if there's been a call from the stewards to warn our drivers to say, hold on, I think someone's got very deep there, and that is KLS1. And I'm wondering if he just simply got it wrong on the brakes there. As we can see in the rear of your camera shot that De Great has got it horrifically wrong into the Mulsanne corner there. And as they all come down the Gulf Straight now towards Indianapolis, I think it's going to be quite calm and sedate as they come through the second of the kinks. And now coming into Indianapolis then, will we see any moves? It looks as though we potentially have a move on here from Dylan Cliff against Yaya, but I don't know if he's going to go for it. I think he's just decided to wait. KLS1 holding on to that P7 right now, but nobody going for anything major. But you can see Spalgazan is getting close to him, and Kreinikople is really forming a little trolley train here, as we said would happen because of the fact that Mazda drops off on the second half of the circuit as it becomes more of a handling circuit, and it is now a drag race up to the Porsche curves here. And we can see that whilst the Mazda was losing initially versus Iman, now Spalgazan is using the slipstream of his teammate's car to get alongside. And as they go into the first of the Porsche curves, Spalgazan running side by side with Iman, and they've gone side by side even further, and they're still too wide. You don't go too wide through there, all the way through there, and they're still too wide. And finally Iman has to back out of it, being forced to the outside, to the inside, and it means that as they cover the Corvette curves now, all of them making it through there relatively unscathed in terms of track limits by the looks of things. It is Spalgazan who is now chasing after his teammate, and surely Spalgazan must be thinking to himself at this point, don't battle with your teammate, do not take out your teammate. So as they come through the final chicane then to complete that number 1, it is Kreinikople leading the field away from Spalgazan, followed by Iman, followed by Yaya, then Dylan Cliff, then it's Olaf Biscuit, then KLS1 as Eclipse goes into the pits on lap number 1. Garrett in P9 and MDC in P10 and Valive in P11. But meanwhile up front we can see that in the charge down to the Dunlop chicane, Yaya in P4 right now is being able to hold off the sustained pressure from Dylan Cliff for the time being. But I'm thinking, ladies and gentlemen, that all of the guys behind Kreinikople right now, apart from Spalgazan it would seem, are all simply pacing one another, and they're waiting till the latter half of the race, because this is a very calm race we've seen so far compared to the other 2 races. Of course this race is longer and it would mandate an approach like that, but I really do suspect that our drivers are keeping it cool here and just deciding to hold on. They're not deciding to push too hard. It would make sense simply because of the fact And at the end of the day, they've got so much to lose if they do anything silly at this point, as Eclipse has come out the pits, and it looks as though he has not taken on a fresh set of tyres. He's gone for his old set of tyres. He's come out just behind Great, which means he's got a slipstream train that he can pull on here and hope that Great stays out for long. Spalgazan is feeling a lot of pressure, though, as they come on towards the second part of the Mulsanne straight here, and you can see that he's relying on his teammate to help him pull away, and Iman is staying behind him, and little bits of bump drafting here we can see initially from Iman, and I don't think he'll be allowed to get away with too much much of that, in all honesty, although I'm not 100% on the rule set there, but I think he's allowed the occasional little bump, but continuously doing it is not going to be permitted as they all come into the second chicane, and nobody's really going for a move. Again, everyone's sizing one another up, bar the Dutchman and the German here in the battle for P8 as they come into the chicane here for the second part of the Mulsanne. Who's going to come out on top as they come into braking? And I think Eclipse is going to simply take the position, or in fact he's backed out of it. It looks as though Doing Great simply had the better over and Eclipse decided better of it. But under braking now into the Mulsanne corner, you could see that Spalgazza has picked up a 1 second penalty. Now, was that for track limits coming down out of the second chicane? I think so, because he's got such a penalty now and he's going to need to burn that, and surely he will have to burn that as they come out of Arnage. I think that's the next penalty zone, but what it means is Spalgazza is going to drop to the rear of this chasing pack with all 6 drivers here within effectively 2.5 seconds one up, from Olaf Biscuit all the way up towards Chronic Opal, and it could be anyone's game here in terms of who is going to be out in front. But you can see they're all forming a train. None of them want to gain on the other, and KRS-One has fallen out of this in terms of being with them, as we see Eclipse going for another potential overtake as they come down into Indianapolis, and Chronic Opal staying ahead of them. Eclipse has got past, we should point out, Garrett, before they went into Indianapolis' braking zone, and I think he's going to hold on here as they come into Arnage. But up front in that battle for P1, you can see all these drivers, and Spalgazza needs to burn that penalty because he's not burning it, and I think he's either forgotten about the penalty zones or he's having a rush of blood to the head right now, because this means effectively that he's burning a penalty under braking zones, and that's going to make it even more difficult for the drivers behind him, because he'll ghost and then he'll unghost into the path of cars chasing him, and our stewards will not be happy with that one. But still, regardless of that, for the time being, it is still all 6 drivers running together, and Iman is going for a move on Spalgazza as they come up into the forward chicane for the second time, and Spalgazza is into the pits. I think he's into the pits there, as we can see that Iman now has picked up a half-second penalty for track limits somewhere in that rundown, or effectively was it coming out of the Corvette curves, but he's burnt that penalty, and this will drive him out. And Olaf Biscuit as well coming into the pits, and hold on a second, what has happened to Spalgazza? In fact, he didn't pick up a penalty, he just went wide. That doesn't make any sense, because he's just dropped so far back. What happened to the driver? He's got it all wrong, and in fact, he span out in the pits, and he's been reset onto the circuit. That is a disaster for the British driver. He got reset out of the pits, and that means now that Chronic Opal does not have a teammate to provide his back marker for him, to run his rear gunner, and instead, he's now going to be exposed to the charging attempts of Yaya, Dylan Cliff, and Iman, and Spalgazza has now got all the work to do, and Olaf Biscuit, having pitted, has cleared Guerre and Eclipse from behind in terms of choosing to pit at the opportune moment, I should point out. But he will not have the slipstream coming down onto the Mulsanne straight, and this will be punishing for Olaf, because Careless-One, by comparison, does. He has the slipstream of Spalgazza, so I think Biscuit has just picked the wrong time to go for this pit stop, because he's got nobody to give him the extra toe on the straights, which means he'll have to make up all the lap time, which we know he can do it because he was the fastest guy in qualifying over a single lap, but he's got all the work to do now to close up what is going to be an increasing gap to our leaders, assuming they do not battle. And you can see here, Yaya is getting closer, and I think the Brit is going to go for the move on the Australian here as they're charging down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, and it's going to be side by side, and I think here, if you're in Chronic shoes, you'll just give the place. And there was a very late little bit of contact there, but I think Chronic's been able to keep it under control, and now the Yaya is up into the race lead, and Dylan is chasing after the pair of them, and behind them, of course, is Iman, as Spalgazza is holding on to P5, but he hit the rev limiter there, going up a gear, coming out of the second chicane, and that means he will be losing out on the acceleration zone. Chronic Opal going for the move then back on Yaya, and Yaya immediately thinks better of it. He decides not to go for the move there, go for the defence there too heavily, because you can see Dylan now has got the drag race, and Dylan immediately thinks second of it. These guys are all playing it so smart, I should point out, sorry, as I'm mincing my words, they're all being so smart because they're holding off of fighting too much, because they know that it's all going to come down to the pit stop and also the final couple of laps. There's no point battling one another hard, but the question will be, who is going to blink and take a set of tyres, and who is going to run it to the end, because that will give a pace difference to the drivers on the laps, but also it'll give them a positional change on track and a time change on track as well, because the amount of time lost in taking those extra tyres. Spalgazza right now holding on to that P5, of course, but he's having so much difficulty in terms of running around, and he's got Careless One all over his 6, and also Olaf Biscuit staying in this, albeit Olaf took the pit stop. But remember, Olaf, having taken that pit stop, is now in a slipstream train, and that means he can gain on the Mulsanne as Chronic Opal goes wide there in the start of the Porsche curves, and there's contact between himself and Yaya. I think they've got away with it, but that was very close to fatal for Yaya there, and I think Chronic just about managed to get it under control. But you can see the pressure he's feeling right now with the Porsche army behind him, simply having that grip advantage and that handling advantage. And now who is going to pit, if anybody here? And it is Chronic Opal and Yaya both into the pits, and Iman as well, which means Dylan Cliff is going to be your race leader, ladies and gentlemen, as they all come around then to start lap number 4. And where will this plant Dylan Cliff by comparison? Now, he was at the rear of the train, and effectively he was about a second back on Chronic Opal, who came into the pits first. But how much of a gap will there be as they'll come out the pits? Well, it looks as though Chronic Opal is going for a tyre change here, whereas Yaya and Iman are not. And this means that after the pit stops, it is Olaf Biscuit now up into P4, having not taken that change of tyres. But Olaf is doing a great job on his tyres, and he's up into P4, and Chronic has got it all to do now in terms of regaining. And Dylan has not got a huge amount of time ahead of the other guys. And that means when he comes into the pits, he's going to have great difficulty in terms of pulling away. But what you can see is Spalgazan currently in P6 after it all happening. I think he's just come out the pits, in fact, but he has got a lot of work to do as he's gone for a new set of tyres, and Careless One behind him as well has done a similar thing. But these drivers are really out of the fight in terms of the top 5, and it's down to Dylan now. What can he do running in that clear air? And if I was Yaya or Iman, as they're trading positions under braking into the first of the chicanes of the Mulsanne Straight, you've got to think, if you're either of these drivers right now, we cannot afford to fight, because if they fight, then they're giving Dylan the opportunity to come out ahead of them and potentially clear them on the slipstream, but it will be so difficult to do so. But any fighting they do here, the gap currently being approximately 5.8 seconds, is going to be fatal in their chase after the Irishman for the win. Now, Olaf Biscuit well with an inspired pit stop. He's only half a second or so outside of that slipstream zone behind our P2 and P3 guys, and there's been a trading position once again as Yaya is now up into P2. Olaf, of course, will want to welcome this so hard, and remember, he's got a fast charging Mazda behind him who has gone wide out of the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, and I'm wondering if that's going to be a penalty for Chronic. I think he's just about dodged the penalty there, but that was so close to a penalty, and he has to be so careful here because he knows he can gain massively on the guys around him, but he's just got to keep it in those track limits, as Dylan right now holding on to the lead for the time being. But that gap is coming down gradually, albeit he's had a very good run out of the Mulsanne corner here by comparison with everyone else behind him. So I think he's doing everything he can right now to nail this, and Dylan really in that commanding position, in that driver's seat, in being able to win this one. So long as he doesn't make any major mistakes, he'll definitely be coming out in the fight for the race win. But where he's positioned for that fight, of course, will be the big question. Further down the field, it's all spread out for the time being as all of our drivers are coming through the Mulsanne straight and into the Mulsanne corner. But really, the big question will be between Iman and Yaya as they've changed places once again. And you can see these little changes in position, these little bits of competing with one another are costing them time again and again to Dylan right now. That gap is now 6.4 seconds roughly, and it's just going to keep opening up if they continue to trade, and it's not what they need as they're coming towards the end of lap number 4. Now Dylan, surely I would suspect, if I was in Dylan's shoes here, as Iman concedes to Yaya here, he gives the place over immediately because he knows he doesn't want to fight this, and Olav is getting closer, Chronic is getting closer, and Spalgazan is quite a way back. But you can imagine if there's a huge fight, then he could find himself tacking onto the tail end of this. Will Dylan pit at the end of this lap? Dylan is into the pits now. This is critical for Dylan, and he gets it wrong on pit entry, and that is going to be fatal for Dylan's chances of coming out in the lead. Now, how will it play out? We're going to stay with Yaya here, but as he comes across the start-finish line to start lap number 5, of course, watch out for that pit exit. Where will Dylan come out? It's going to be on the left-hand side here, and as they're all coming through then to turn number 1, where's Dylan going to be? And it looks as though Dylan is not going to be coming out near these guys. Now, did Dylan go for a tyre change? I think he did, and in fact, we can see he did go for a tyre change, and that's dropped him behind the whole chase for the race win. I think Dylan might be out of this chase now because he's so far back, albeit there's 2 laps to go, but that's a disaster for Dylan. And I think he's played the wrong gamble there. He needed to go for the tyres, but also that pit entry was hazardous to his health in terms of his racing aspirations. And well, at this point, it's any one of our top 4 are definitely in the hunt for the race win. But of course, do not count Dylan out, because if these guys start fighting, which I'm sure they will do as we come to the end of lap number 5, you can imagine Dylan's going to be there and closing feverishly. And you can see immediately Iman, now knowing that they've cleared Dylan in terms of the strategy, is starting to position himself for the battle. And Olav is also getting into the mix. As you can see, he looked for a quick lunge to the inside there into the opening miles as she came, but then thought better of it as Yaya closed the door, and he came from a long way back, Olav. And I think that was more opportunist than smart play, and he realised that and he backed out of it. So well done to the Brit for being smart about backing out. And Krynik right now at the back of this, only 1.3 seconds of our race leader. Do not count him out. He will be closing up very gradually. And Dylan is 4 seconds down and losing, of course, at the moment in terms of the lap time, because he does not have that slipstream. And really, everybody else out on circuit is so spaced out right now. It is all down to our top 4. Who is going to win after 1.5 more laps? Will it be any of the 3 Brits, or will it be the Australian? Will we have one new winner in EU Division 1, or will it be one of our 3 existing winners who will win for the final time? And really, right now, if you had to put money on it, I think it could be anyone. I can't predict who it's going to be. And you can see that by Iman simply braking as he did that, and Yarn not going for a move, trying to be smart and stay behind and not cost time, it's meant that Olav has closed up, and also Krynik is closing leap after leap right now on these guys, and they're going to start fighting as they come down to Indianapolis. And you can see Olav initially pulling out and realising he hasn't got the speed. He has not got the overspeed to get the move done into Indianapolis initially. But is he going to go for it? No, instead he's defending against Krynik, and Krynik is just staying right there and thinking it's okay, as Yaya makes a mistake and goes deep into Indianapolis, and it means Olav is up. But in return now, Yaya has to decide, does he go defensive against Krynik as he gets it wrong? And that means that as he comes out Arnage, Krynik is up into P3, and that's a disaster for Yaya, but not too disastrous, because he's still in there. And look in the rear of your picture who is creeping up in P5. It is Dylan Cliff. He's only a tenth or 2 outside of that slipstream zone. He just needs to get closer, and he'll be hoping that these guys up front continue to fight. And you can see that now Biscuit is up into the lead. He's got past on the run down into the Porsche curves. In return, now Iman is all over his 6, running like a bad rash all over the back of Olaf Biscuit's exhaust ports. And really, who is going to come out on top? It's going to be one more lap, and surely now they're all got to be thinking to one another after multiple laps, right? Don't do anything stupid. The time is going to come. The time is now. Who is going to come out on top? One more lap to go, ladies and gentlemen. And it'll be Olaf Biscuit who kicks off that lap. And you've got Krynik who is in the mix here. And if I had to put bets on right now, I think Dylan Cliff could make a surprise leap into this battle at the end here. As we see there's no other fighting out on track, as Eclipse has got it horrifically wrong out of Arnage. And it means Valev is going to be catching up to him and MDC. But up front, and already, my apologies, we've missed it. But there has been a move for the race lead. And Olaf Biscuit is holding on for the time being. But Iman right now all out of position, and Krynik all over his 6 as they come up into Tetra Rouge. We're just going to take a quick flick back at what happened there. So coming out into turn 1 then, I think Iman went for an absolutely dastardly move into turn number 2, and he just simply cooked it too heavy on the brakes there. And in fact, yep, he went for it and then blocked it, and it just got wrong there, and Olaf Biscuit came out on top. So that's what happened there. And now as they're coming onto the first part of the Mulsanne straight then, you can see all 4 drivers, and we do have Dylan Cliff. He's in the distant toe of Yaya's car right now. You see Iman sizing up a move, Krynik sizing up a move. They're 3 wide under braking, and who's going to hold on to that lead coming out? And Krynik is pushed wide, and he's going to rejoin, but that's going to surely be a track limits penalty, and that is going to put Krynik out of contention. Yep, it's a 1 second penalty, and he will have to serve that, and that means that now it's between Iman and Olaf Biscuit currently as they come onto the second chicane and the second part of the Mulsanne Street. Olaf Biscuit is going for a move here. Yaya behind them. Krynik has dropped back to P5, but he's not out of this yet with Dylan Cliff now in the mix. It's a 5-way fight once again. Iman is holding on for dear life, and it's going to get closer and closer. You can see already Krynik is already within 2.25 seconds of our race leader, and they haven't even come to the end of the straight yet. They're not giving up any of them, as Dylan Cliff is now looking for a move, and he's pulling out initially, but he realises he can't go for it. But you can see again Iman and Biscuit fighting, and Iman is defending so hard into the Mulsanne corner, and he comes out on top initially, but you can see that it's costing everyone so much momentum because of how defensive he's driving, but certainly no more than other Olaf Biscuit. And Dylan is all all over the back of Yaya, and Chronicopol is getting into this mix, and it's coming into Indianapolis now, and surely they can't go too wide through here. They're just getting closer and closer, and there's 3 wide, and there's contact! There's contact, and Iman just recovers it as Dylan Cliff goes into the side of him. We're not sure what happened there, but they settle down, and Dylan is up into P3, but that was very close, and Dylan gets it wrong initially, and Iman backs out of it, and Olaf is holding on right now, and it's only 2 sectors to go for Olaf to bring this home, but all 4 of the guys behind him will want this win so much. They've all been fighting for it so hard, and I'm expecting there's going to be some sort of move surely, and no more than other. It'll be Chronicopol who will want the move as Dylan looks to the outside into the start of the push curves then, but they're all fighting for P2, and this is giving Olaf a space to run away, and Dylan is defending against Iman here, and I think he's trying to hold on for P3 because he's just letting Yaya and Biscuit pull away as Iman is now being pulled into a back and forth fight between himself and Dylan, and I think Olaf has done it here because of the defending from Yaya. Of course, we've still got 2 chicanes to go, and anything can happen as they all come through the final set of chicanes then. Olaf Biscuit coming out of the final corner, and he's going to run along the line, and it's the win for Olaf Biscuit. Yaya in second, Dylan Cliff in third, Iman in fourth, and Chronicopol in P5. No change at the end there, and Chronicopol's teammate Spalgazan comes home in P6. Behind him, the Dutchman of Callis 1, having picked up some places over the course of this race, coming home in P7. Congratulations to the Dutchman, of course. And in P8, coming into the final set of corners now and come out of the Corvette curves, it's going to be Dergerate coming home in P8. And it has been such a crazy and as great as just weaving left to right here. I think that car's on its last legs in terms of its tyres, but he's bringing it calmly through now. Through the forward chicane, just taking his time here. He's got the time to do so, just coming across the line very gently. And then in P9, it'll be the Dutchman of Eclipse. He's just coming through the Porsche curves then, and now onto the forward chicanes. Just got to nail 4 more corners. The first 2 complete, 2 to go. Coming through then to complete his race in P9. And then in P10 it will be Valev. And in P11, last but not least, as he gets it all wrong, coming out of the final corner for last time is MDC. Come on MDC, get it across the line. A round of applause for everybody, of course. And MDC just snaking his way across, just tiptoeing now. And those are your final race results, subject to any stewards' decisions, of course. But your race winner, ladies and gentlemen, Olaf Biscuit. What a crazy end to the races, folks. And here's your race results just for confirmation. Your race winner, Olaf Biscuit, by 0.5 tenth over Yaya. Dylan Cliff in third, holding on for third in the end against Iman and Chronicopol, finishing P4 and P5 respectively. And in P6, Spalgazan. It didn't work out for the Australian and the Brit tonight. They had a really good start in this one, but it just didn't work out. But they put in a valiant effort, and that forms our top 5 and our 6th place man. And our fastest lap there, a 3:19.0, going to Olaf Biscuit on lap number 4. Goodness me. Goodness me. I think, if you don't mind, folks, we're going to take a quick sip of water. We just need a breather. What an ending. But what an ending on that one. I say it could have been anyone in that pack. But now it's time, of course, subject to a small break for King of the Karts, which we'll be taking part in, as is our tradition. I think there may be some questions about some moments in that race. A key example would be Spalgazan not taking the burn on his penalty. But again, that's for our stewards to decide. Our race drivers, of course, are mandated to put in any queries they have. But we'll see. A fantastic racing from everyone tonight. It's been phenomenal. It really has. Everybody deserves a round of applause, regardless of what the final standings are. They have provided us with some fantastic racing at EU Division 1. And well, we've got 2 more divisions to look at this week. Who knows what could happen in EU Divisions 2 and 3 over the next 2 nights. But focusing on EU Division 1 guys right now, congratulations to Olaf Biscuit, who, if his results stand, will be our EU Division 1 champion, as I understand it, for season 35. And I'm getting some happy warnings from my controller to say the battery's getting low, so we should be okay to do this. Just going to quickly get out on circuit. And we're getting underway then with King of the Karts. Ooh, those curbs are raised, got to be wary of those. Here we go then, ladies and gentlemen. Time for King of the Karts in EU Division 1. I think we'll be starting right at the back. Yeah, P5. And Phil the Vibes is going to be joining us on that back row. Hello to Phil the Vibes, great driver and great gentleman. Oh, whoopsie daisy. Wrong gear. I've got to remember how to get the cockpit view back. There we go, that's the cockpit view. Clips will catch back up in a minute because we have the boost, of course. Hello MDC, my old friend. How you doing, Mike? Just giving him a little bit of gentle poke up the backside. As we can see, Eclipse is trying to come through. 6th gear is a terrible gear, of course, for this kart. Sorry, Mike, didn't mean to cause an incident. Wait. Everyone giving a knock. We've got a long way to go yet, though. Chronic, give me a little bit of a push. Steady on. It's going to be a four-way battle then for the win. Oh! Oh no, no, it's gone. Might be able to use the boost of the guys in front again. Still got a lot of laps to go. Well, we're catching up to leaders already. Oh, I won't let you cut. Well, that's a shame. Oh well. So we've got track resets on. Fair enough. I'll have to remember that for tomorrow night's EU Division 2. Ah well. Thought I could have won that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to have to be it for tonight's entertainment. That's King of the Karts. But I hope you have enjoyed, as always, and that marks the conclusion of EU Division 1 for Season 35. The final standings will, of course, be out within the coming days. But if you have enjoyed, be sure to come back tomorrow and Wednesday for Divisions 2 and 3 in EU, respectively. But until then, I have been your host, TX141, or Paul Walshaw, Britain a Spit. And as always, until next time, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, stay on track. Take care.